10 days. That's all I have left before they take everything. Rosalind stared at the eviction notice, her hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. The ranch her father died protecting, the land soaked with 3 generations of sweat and blood, gone. Unless she could find a husband. A real one, with legal papers, within 10 days. The answer stood across the dusty street, a drifter with cold eyes and secrets darker than the storm clouds gathering overhead. She didn't trust him, but desperation makes allies of strangers. If you want to see how far Rosalind's fight takes her, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The Wyoming sun beat down merciless that afternoon, turning the county office into an oven that smelled of old paper and broken promises. Rosalind Chen pressed her palms flat against the clerk's desk, leaving damp prints on the scarred wood. There has to be another way. Bernard Hutchins didn't look up from his ledger. 20 years behind that desk had carved grooves into his face deeper than the creek beds during drought season. Law's the law, Miss Chen. Your father's homestead claim required proof of continuous occupation and improvement. He's been dead 4 months. You're unmarried. County rules say, I know what the rules say. Rosalind's voice came out sharper than she intended. She forced herself to breathe, to remember that Hutchins wasn't the enemy. He was just the man holding the enemy's pen. I've been running that ranch alone since I was 16. Pa's health was failing long before he died. I'm the one who kept it going. That may be. Hutchins finally met her eyes, and she saw something there that might have been sympathy. Might have been. But the law says a woman alone can't hold a homestead claim. You need a husband, Miss Chen, legal and binding. You've got 30 days to present marriage papers, or the land goes to auction. 30 days. A month to find a man willing to tie himself to a failing ranch, and a woman the town called Chen's half-breed daughter behind her back. Her mother had been Chinese, come over with the railroad workers, and Wyoming didn't forget things like that. Didn't forgive them either. Rosalind walked out of that office with her spine straight and her eyes dry. She'd learned early that tears were currency wasted on people who couldn't afford to care. The town of Broken Creek sprawled along the railroad tracks like a drunk sleeping off a bender, unplanned, graceless, and vaguely apologetic about its own existence. 2 saloons, 1 church, a general store that doubled as the post office, and a dozen other buildings that served whatever purpose would keep them from falling empty. She passed the Silver Dollar Saloon and caught sight of her reflection in the dusty window. 23 years old, sun-darkened skin, black hair pulled back so tight it made her temples ache. She'd worn her only good dress, navy cotton with pearl buttons, mended at the collar where it had torn last spring, made her look respectable, made her look desperate. Both were true. "Rosalind!" Mary Parker waved from across the street, her blonde curls bouncing beneath a bonnet that probably cost more than Rosalind's entire wardrobe. How did it go with Mr. Hutchins? Mary was the banker's daughter, educated back east, returned home with refined manners and a collection of books she loaned to anyone who asked. She was also the closest thing Rosalind had to a friend in this town, though friendship between them required careful navigation of the distance between their worlds. 30 days, Rosalind said. I need a husband in 30 days. Mary's smile faltered. Oh, Rosalind, I was hoping they'd make an exception. Hoping's a luxury. Rosalind adjusted the basket on her arm. She'd sold 6 eggs that morning, barely enough for lamp oil and salt. You know anyone desperate enough to marry a woman with a failing ranch and a Chinese mother? Don't, Mary's voice hardened. Don't talk about yourself that way. I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking. Then everyone else is a fool. Mary glanced around, lowered her voice. Listen, my father mentioned something. There's a man who came through on the train last week. Been staying at the boarding house, doing odd jobs. Keeps to himself mostly. And he's alone. No wife, no prospects that anyone can tell. Tommy Sullivan said he watched this man fix a broken wagon wheel in under an hour, using nothing but scraps from Henson's junkyard. Said he worked like someone who'd done hard labor before. Rosalind felt a small, dangerous flutter of hope. Does this miracle worker have a name? Silas? Silas Trent. Dark hair, tall, doesn't smile much. Has a scar across his left eyebrow. Mary hesitated. But Rosalind, there's something about him, something that makes people nervous. He's running from something, you can tell. Aren't we all? Rosalind shifted her basket. Where can I find him? Last I heard, he was repairing fence posts out at the Masterson place. But Rosalind, be careful. A desperate marriage is one thing. A dangerous one is another. Rosalind had already started walking. Right now, I'm not sure I know the difference. The Masterson property sat 3 miles west of town, accessible by a wagon road that had seen better decades. Rosalind walked it in just under an hour, her boots raising small clouds of dust that hung in the still air like accusations. She found him in the south pasture, stripped to his shirt sleeves despite the heat, driving fence posts into earth that looked hard as iron. He worked with methodical efficiency, each swing of the sledgehammer precise and controlled. Mary was right. He was tall, probably 6 feet, with the kind of lean muscle that came from necessity rather than vanity. He saw her approaching but didn't stop working, just drove 3 more posts before finally setting down the hammer and reaching for his hat. Help you? His voice was rough, like it didn't get used often. Maybe. Rosalind stopped a few feet away, close enough to see the scar Mary had mentioned, a pale line cutting through his left eyebrow, close enough to see his eyes too, which were gray and assessed her with the kind of wariness you'd give a snake that might or might not be poisonous. You Silas Trent? Depends on who's asking. Someone who might have a job for you, better paying than fence work. He studied her for a long moment. I'm not interested in robbing banks, if that's what you're selling. Despite everything, Rosalind almost smiled. Nothing that exciting. I need a husband. Legally binding, paper official, for at least long enough to secure my land claim. In return, you get half ownership of a cattle ranch. 300 acres, water rights, decent grazing land when we're not in drought. Silas's expression didn't change. And when the land's secure? Then we go our separate ways if you want. Keep your half, sell it, do whatever suits you. I'm offering a business arrangement, not a love match. Why me? Because you're new in town, which means you don't know enough to be particular. Because you look like you could work hard when you needed to. And because, she met his eyes straight on, you look like a man who understands desperation. Something flickered across his face, too quick to name. He picked up his hat, knocked the dust off it against his thigh. What's the catch? 30 days to make it legal. We have to convince the county clerk we're genuine. That means living together, acting like a married couple, at least in public. She paused. And someone's going to dig into your past. Small towns are like that. Whatever you're running from, it's going to surface. I'm not running. Everyone's running from something, Mr. Trent. I'm running from poverty and orphanhood. Question is whether what you're running from is going to burn us both. Silas turned away, picked up the sledgehammer again. For a moment, Rosalind thought he was dismissing her, but then he spoke. I worked for the Union Pacific, laid track for 3 years after the war, saved every penny, was going to buy land in Montana, start fresh. He drove a post into the ground with savage force. Someone cleaned out my savings, friend I trusted, left me with nothing. So you're broke. Broke and angry. He looked at her again. That honest enough for you? It's a start. Rosalind adjusted her basket. I'm offering you a chance to get what you wanted. Land, a fresh start. All you have to do is sign some papers and pretend to tolerate me for a few months. And the ranch? You said it's failing. It is. My father died owing money to half the merchants in Broken Creek. The cattle herd's down to 30 head, and we lost most of the spring calves to disease. The barn needs repairs, the fence line is falling apart, and we're 2 dry seasons away from turning into a dust bowl. She set the basket down, tired of carrying it. But the land's good. The water rights alone are worth fighting for. And I know how to work. I'm not asking you to save me, Mr. Trent. I'm asking you to be my partner in saving something worth keeping. Silas was quiet for so long, Rosalind started to feel foolish. Here she was, proposing marriage to a stranger in the middle of a pasture, laying out her failures like they were selling points. Finally, he set down the hammer. When would we do this? Soon as possible. I'll pay for the license. We can see the preacher tomorrow if you're willing. I'll need somewhere to stay tonight. Think about it properly. Boarding house is full. You can sleep in my barn. It's not much, but it's dry. Rosalind picked up her basket. I'm at the Chen Ranch, 2 miles north of town. Follow the road until you see the broken windmill. I know the place. Silas wiped his hands on his pants. Saw it from the train when I came through. Thought it looked lonely. Lonely and yours if you want it. Rosalind started walking, then turned back. Mr. Trent, whatever you're angry about, whoever took your money, don't bring that anger to my ranch. I've got enough weight to carry without adding yours. He didn't answer, just picked up the hammer again and went back to work. But Rosalind thought she saw something shift in those gray eyes. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. Either way, she'd made her offer. Now she'd have to wait and see if desperation could make allies of strangers, or if she'd just invited something darker than poverty onto her land. Rosalind walked back to town as the sun started its descent, painting the sky the color of a healing bruise. She stopped at Henson's general store to buy flour and coffee with the egg money, measuring out portions in her head like an accountant balancing dire books. Here you were at the county office today. Leonard Henson weighed the flour with hands so practiced he didn't need to look at the scale. Hutchins give you any flexibility on that deadline? News traveled fast in Broken Creek, fast and usually mutated into something uglier along the way. 30 days, Rosalind said, same as everyone else would get. Shame about your father. James was a good man, even if he was... Henson caught himself. Well, good man. Even if he was married to a Chinese woman, Rosalind finished silently, even if his daughter carries that shame in her face. Thank you for saying so. She counted out coins onto the counter, exact to the penny. You know, Henson said carefully, my nephew Andrew is back from Denver. Nice boy. Steady work at the rail yard. He's been asking after you. Rosalind had met Andrew Henson exactly once. He'd smelled of cheap whiskey and had looked at her the way some men looked at horses they were considering buying, assessing value, checking for defects. That's kind, but I've made other arrangements. Henson's eyebrows went up. That's so. Anyone I know? Silas Trent. The name landed between them like a stone in still water. Henson's expression went carefully neutral. The drifter? Rosalind, you can't be serious. Why not? Because nobody knows a damn thing about him, that's why. He could be anyone. Could have done anything before he showed up here. Could say the same about half the men in this town. Rosalind picked up her purchases. At least Mr. Trent is honest about having a past he doesn't want to discuss. This is a mistake. Probably, but it's my mistake to make. She headed for the door, then paused. Mr. Henson? You remember when my mother first came to town? How people talked about her, about my father for marrying her, how they said it was a mistake, that he should be with someone appropriate. Henson's face colored. That was different. Was it? Rosalind stepped out into the fading light. Seems to me people always think they know better about other folks' choices. Funny how often they're wrong. She walked home as the sky turned from purple to black, stars emerging like pinpricks in a dark cloth. The ranch appeared gradually, first the broken windmill Silas had mentioned, its blades frozen mid-turn like a clock stopped at the moment of her father's death. Then the barn, sagging slightly to the left. Finally the house itself, small and weathered, windows dark. Rosalind lit lamps, started a fire in the stove, heated water for washing. The routine was familiar, almost meditative. Her mother had taught her that ritual could be armor against chaos. Every night, light the lamps. Every morning, feed the animals. The world might crack apart, but these small acts remained solid. She was eating a simple dinner of bread and beans when she heard hoofbeats outside. Rosalind opened the door to find William Dalton dismounting from a bay mare that probably cost more than her entire ranch. William was 45, prosperous, owner of the largest spread in the county. He was also widowed, ambitious, and had made it clear on multiple occasions that he wouldn't mind adding Rosalind's water rights to his holdings. Evening, Rosalind. He removed his hat, revealing hair gone silver at the temples. Hope I'm not disturbing your supper. What can I do for you, Mr. Dalton? Heard some troubling news in town. Heard you're planning to marry that drifter, Silas Trent. Word traveled faster than she'd thought. News spreads quick. It does when it's concerning. Dalton stepped closer to the porch. Rosalind, I'll speak plain. I've watched you struggle these past months. Watched you try to run this place alone, watched the debt pile up. It doesn't have to be this way. I'm managing. Are you? He gestured at the dark fields, the broken windmill. Your herd's diminished, your credit's exhausted. In 6 months, maybe less, you'll lose everything anyway. Marrying some stranger won't change that. Then why are you here? Dalton smiled, the kind of smile that probably worked on women who had more options than Rosalind did. Because I'm offering you an alternative. Marry me instead. I'll settle your father's debts, merge this property with mine, give you security and respect. You'd be Mrs. William Dalton. That means something in this county. And my ranch? Would become part of mine, naturally, but you'd have a share in it, legally binding. I'm not trying to steal from you, Rosalind. I'm trying to save you. Rosalind leaned against the doorframe, suddenly tired beyond measure. Let me make sure I understand. You want me to marry you, give you my land, and in return I get to be your wife and part owner of a ranch that would mostly be yours. When you put it that way, it sounds mercenary. Isn't it? No more than marrying a stranger for the same reason. Dalton's voice hardened slightly. At least with me, you know what you're getting. Trent could be anyone. Could be running from the law, from debts, from crimes you can't imagine. You'd be tying yourself to a complete unknown. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Dalton, but I've made my choice. Rosalind, I said no. She straightened. I'd rather take my chances with a stranger who doesn't expect me to be grateful for losing everything my father built. Dalton's expression shifted, something colder replacing the practiced charm. You're making a mistake. This ranch won't survive even with a husband. The drought's getting worse. The cattle prices are dropping. In a year, maybe less, you'll wish you'd taken my offer. Maybe, but it'll be my mistake to make. He mounted his horse with the easy grace of a man who'd never questioned his right to anything he wanted. When this all falls apart, and it will, don't come looking for my help. I won't offer it twice. Rosalind watched him ride away into the darkness, then closed the door and locked it. Her hands were shaking again, but not from fear, from anger. From the weight of being a problem men thought they could solve if she'd just be reasonable enough to let them. She cleaned up her dinner dishes, banked the fire, and climbed the narrow stairs to her bedroom. From the window, she could just barely see the barn. No light showed there yet, but it was early still. She wondered if Silas would come at all, or if he'd thought better of her desperate offer. Wondered what kind of man would be crazy enough to accept it. Silas arrived just past midnight. Rosalind woke to the sound of a horse in the yard and came downstairs with her father's rifle, heart hammering against her ribs. She'd learned to be careful. The world wasn't kind to women alone, especially not women like her. But it was Silas, leading a tired-looking gelding toward the barn. He saw her silhouetted in the doorway and raised his hand slightly, a gesture of peace. "Didn't mean to wake you," he called. "Just getting settled." Rosalind lowered his rifle. "There's fresh hay in the loft, water pumps by the door. Help yourself to anything you need." He nodded and continued toward the barn. Rosalind watched him unsaddle the horse with the same methodical efficiency he'd shown with the fence posts. Then she went back inside, laid the rifle beside her bed, and tried to sleep. It didn't come easy. She kept thinking about Dalton's words, about the choice she'd made. Maybe she was a fool. Maybe marrying a stranger was just another form of losing everything, just slower and more humiliating. But at least this way, she'd go down fighting on her own terms. When she came downstairs at dawn, Silas was already outside, examining the broken windmill. He'd stripped to his shirt sleeves again despite the morning chill, studying the frozen mechanism with focused attention. Rosalind brought him coffee, real coffee, not the chicory blend she usually drank. If they were going to be partners, even temporarily, she could afford one small gesture of good faith. "It's been broke since last winter," she said, handing him the cup. "Storm damaged the gearing. I couldn't afford to fix it." Silas accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. "I could probably get it working again. Wouldn't be pretty, but it'd pump." "You know windmills?" "I know how things work, how they break, how to make them work again with whatever's available." He sipped the coffee. "Learned it on the railroad. Out there, you don't have the luxury of waiting for proper parts." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun climb over the eastern hills. The morning light revealed the ranch in all its desperate detail: the sagging barn, the scattered fence posts, the fields gone brown from lack of rain. "I thought about your offer," Silas said finally. "All night, pretty much. Tried to find a reason to say no." Rosalind's chest tightened. And? Couldn't find one that made sense. He turned to face her. I'm tired of running, tired of working for other people, building their dreams while mine gather dust. You're offering me a chance at something real, something mine. Ours, Rosalind corrected. If we do this, it's a partnership. Ours, then. He extended his hand. I'll marry you, Miss Chen. I'll work this ranch and help you save it, but I need you to understand something. She took his hand. His palm was calloused, his grip firm, but not crushing. What? I'm not a good man. I've done things I'm not proud of. Hurt people who probably didn't deserve it. And whatever's behind me, he paused, shadows moving across his face. It might catch up eventually. When it does, it could bring trouble to your door. Everyone has ghosts, Mr. Trent. Mine have teeth. Rosalind held his gaze. So do mine. We'll manage. They shook on it there in the yard, with the broken windmill watching and the morning sun painting everything the color of new promises. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even particularly hopeful. But it was honest, and honesty was more than most marriages in Broken Creek could claim. We should see the preacher today, Rosalind said. Get the paper signed before anyone else comes offering alternatives. Someone already did? William Dalton, last night, wanted me to marry him instead, give him the ranch, accept his generous charity. Silas's expression hardened. What'd you tell him? That I'd rather take my chances with a stranger. That's supposed to make me feel good? It's supposed to be the truth. Rosalind started walking toward the house. Come on, we've got a wedding to arrange, and I imagine you'll want to wash up first. You smell like horse and desperation. So do you. Despite everything, the impossible odds, the looming deadline, the fact that she was about to marry a man whose last name she'd learned yesterday, Rosalind smiled. Then we'll fit right together. They rode into town in Rosalind's wagon, sitting side by side on the bench seat, with careful distance between them. The road was dusty, rutted from spring rains that had dried without bringing renewal. Grasshoppers clicked in the brown grass, the only sound besides the wagon wheels and the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves. Tell me about your father, Silas said suddenly. Rosalind kept her eyes on the road. Why? People are going to ask questions. We should know basic facts about each other. Make it convincing. He was right, of course. Rosalind gathered her thoughts, picking through memories like sorting seeds from chaff. James Chen, born in Virginia, came west after the war. Worked on the railroad, same as you, until he saved enough to file a homestead claim. Met my mother at a workers' camp in Sacramento. She was cooking for the crews, sending money back to family in China. Rosalind paused. Everyone told him not to marry her, said it would ruin his prospects, make him an outsider. He did it anyway. He loved her. He did, fiercely. And it cost him exactly what they said it would. Jobs he couldn't get, credit he couldn't secure, friends who stopped being friends. Rosalind swallowed hard. But he never regretted it. Even when she died giving birth to my brother, he was stillborn. Even then, Pa said she was worth every hardship. How old were you when she died? 12. Old enough to remember everything, young enough to still need her. Rosalind flicked the reins, urging the horse a little faster. Your turn. Tell me about the war. Silas was quiet so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, I was 17 when I enlisted. Lied about my age, thought it'd be glorious, saving the Union, fighting for something that mattered. His voice went flat. Took about 3 days of actual combat to realize war isn't glorious. It's just mud and blood and watching boys die for reasons that stop making sense somewhere between the first artillery shell and the last one. Which side? Union. Pennsylvania Regiment. Fought at Antietam, Gettysburg, half a dozen smaller engagements I can't even remember the names of anymore. They all blend together after a while. Rosalind glanced at him. His face had gone distant, eyes focused on something she couldn't see. That where you got the scar? His hand moved unconsciously to the mark above his eyebrow. No, that came later. Different fight. He didn't elaborate, and Rosalind didn't push. They all had wounds they weren't ready to show yet. The church sat on the edge of town, white clapboard with a crooked steeple and a bell that hadn't rung in years. Reverend Mitchell tended it with the weary dedication of a man who'd long ago stopped expecting miracles, but kept showing up anyway. He was in the garden when they arrived, pulling weeds from between rows of vegetables with dirt-stained hands. "Miss Chen," Mitchell straightened, wiping his forehead, "wasn't expecting to see you today." "Reverend, I need a favor. We need to be married, today if possible." Mitchell's eyes moved from Rosalind to Silas and back again. "That's rather sudden." "I know, but I've got a deadline with the county office. 30 days to present marriage papers or lose the ranch. Can't afford to wait." "And you, young man," Mitchell addressed Silas, "you understand what you're entering into?" "Yes, sir." "Marriage is a sacred bond, not a business transaction." Silas met his eyes steadily. "With respect, Reverend, seems like most marriages I've seen involve at least as much business as blessing. At least we're being honest about it." Mitchell looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Silas's voice stopped him. Maybe he recognized honesty when he heard it, or maybe he just recognized desperation and knew it wouldn't be argued away. "I'll need witnesses," he said finally, "and you'll both need to swear before God that you're entering this union willingly." "We can do that," Rosalind said. "Then come inside. Let me get my book." The church interior was cool and dim, smelling of old wood and older prayers. Mitchell gathered what he needed while Rosalind and Silas stood in awkward silence near the altar. Someone had left flowers there, probably from a funeral earlier in the week. They were starting to wilt. "Having second thoughts?" Silas asked quietly. "Third and fourth ones, too." Rosalind smoothed her dress, the same navy cotton she'd worn to the county office. "You?" "Every minute since you made your offer." He paused. "But I'm still here." "So am I." Mitchell returned with his book and two women from the church auxiliary, elderly sisters named Ruth and Agnes, who looked at Silas with identical expressions of suspicion and at Rosalind with something that might have been pity. "We're ready when you are," Mitchell said. The ceremony was brief, stripped of romance or pretense. Mitchell read the required words, his voice carrying the weight of ritual, if not genuine joy. Rosalind and Silas spoke their vows mechanically, each promise feeling like another stone added to a foundation that might hold or might crumble, depending on winds they couldn't predict. "Do you, Rosalind Mary Chen, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do." "And do you, Silas James Trent, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do." "By the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife." Mitchell closed his book with a soft thud. "You may kiss the bride if you're so inclined." Silas looked at Rosalind. She nodded slightly. He leaned in and pressed his lips to hers, brief, formal, utterly without passion. It felt less like a kiss and more like a signature on a contract. "Congratulations," Mitchell said, though he didn't sound convinced. "May God guide you both through whatever challenges lie ahead." They signed the papers, the witnesses signed, Mitchell signed and stamped everything official. Rosalind tucked the marriage certificate into her bag with hands that only trembled slightly. There, done. She was Mrs. Silas Trent now, at least on paper. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright, too indifferent to what had just transpired. Rosalind climbed onto the wagon seat and waited for Silas to join her. "We should stop at the county office," she said. "File the papers while we're in town." "Might as well." They drove through Broken Creek's dusty streets, past the curious stares and whispered conversations. Rosalind kept her chin up, her expression neutral. Let them talk. They'd talk regardless of what she did. At the county office, Bernard Hutchins looked up from his eternal ledger and blinked in surprise. "Back already, Miss Chen?" "Mrs. Trent now." Rosalind placed the marriage certificate on his desk. "Here's your proof of marriage, signed, witnessed, and legal. I believe that satisfies the homestead requirements." Hutchins examined the document with the care of a man who'd seen every type of fraud the human imagination could produce. "Married this morning?" "About an hour ago." "Rather quick, wasn't it?" "You gave me 30 days. I used one."
That leaves 29 as buffer in case you find some other requirement I need to satisfy. Hutchins' lips twitched. Might have been a smile, might have been indigestion. Fair point, Mrs. Trent. Fair point. He opened his stamp pad, marked the certificate with official approval, and entered something into his ledger. Congratulations on your marriage. I'll update the land records accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchins. They walked out of the county office legally married and legally entitled to the ranch. It should have felt like victory. Instead, Rosalind just felt tired and unsettled, like she'd set something in motion that couldn't be stopped even if she wanted to. That went easier than expected, Silas said as they climbed back onto the wagon. Don't celebrate yet. The county accepts our marriage, but the real test is whether the ranch survives it. Rosalind gathered the reins. We should get back. There's work to do, and daylight's wasting. They rode back in silence, the weight of what they'd done settling between them like a third passenger. Rosalind found herself stealing glances at her new husband, still thinking of him as a stranger despite the ring now on her finger, a simple silver band they'd purchased from the general store for $3. $3 for a marriage. Seemed about right, given the circumstances. When they reached the ranch, Silas helped her down from the wagon with a hand that lingered just a moment too long, then pulled back like he'd touched something hot. I'll start on that windmill, he said. See if I can get it working before dark. I'll tend the livestock, then start on dinner. They separated to their tasks, each retreating to familiar work like soldiers to their trenches. Rosalind fed the cattle, pitifully few, their ribs showing through dull coats, and collected eggs from the chickens. 4 eggs today, better than yesterday. She was coming back from the henhouse when she saw a rider approaching. Even at a distance, she recognized the horse, a gray mare with white stockings. Thomas Sullivan, the town's unofficial gossip and official troublemaker. Mrs. Trent! He called it out with exaggerated cheer as he dismounted. Or should I still call you Miss Chen? Hard to keep track when marriages happen faster than fence posts go up. Mr. Sullivan, what brings you out here? Just being neighborly. Heard you tied the knot with that drifter from the boarding house. Wanted to extend my congratulations. His smile was all teeth and no warmth. Also wanted to share some interesting news I heard at the Silver Dollar yesterday evening. Rosalind felt ice settle in her stomach. What news? Fellow came through on the eastbound train? Freight inspector from Pennsylvania. He was talking about a man he used to know back east. Man who got into some trouble over a card game, apparently. Accusations of cheating, money owed, threats made. Sullivan's eyes gleamed. Said this man disappeared about 3 months ago. Last anyone saw, he was heading west. Plenty of men head west, Mr. Sullivan. Doesn't mean anything. True. Except this freight inspector, he gave a description. Tall man, dark hair, scar over his left eye. Went by the name Trent. Sullivan watched her carefully. Your new husband wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would he? I suggest you take your gossip and leave my property, Mr. Sullivan. Now, Mrs. Trent, I'm just trying to help. See, if your husband is the same man, and we both know he is, then you've married a man wanted for fraud and assault. County might have some concerns about that. Might wonder if this whole marriage is legitimate or just a scheme to steal land from its rightful claimants. Rosalind's hand found the egg basket, gripping it hard enough to crack one of the shells. My marriage is legitimate. The county accepted it. Unless you have actual proof of wrongdoing, I suggest you keep your rumors to yourself. No need to get hostile, I'm on your side. Sullivan remounted his horse. Just thought you should know what people are saying. What they might do if they decide your husband's past matters more than your present need. He rode off, leaving Rosalind standing in the yard with a basket of eggs and a growing sense that she'd traded one set of problems for another, larger and more dangerous. She found Silas at the windmill, covered in grease and rust, working by lantern light as the sun set. Someone came by, she said without preamble. Sullivan. He's been talking to people. Says there's a freight inspector from Pennsylvania looking for a man matching your description. Card game, fraud accusations, assault charges. Silas's hand stilled on the gearing. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then, it's true. Which part? All of it, mostly. He wiped his hands on a rag. I was in a card game, high stakes. Man accused me of cheating when I won. I didn't cheat, but he had friends who believed him. They came after me in an alley, 4 against 1. I fought back. His voice dropped. Fought hard. Put 2 of them in the hospital. The man who accused me, I might have broken his jaw. Did you cheat? No. You sure? His eyes met hers, gray and steady. I'm sure. Rosalind believed him. Not because she knew him, she didn't, not really, but because something in his voice rang true. Desperation had taught her to recognize honesty, even when it came wrapped in violence. Sullivan's going to spread this story, she said. The whole town will know by tomorrow. People will question our marriage, question whether it's legitimate. County might even reopen the case. I can leave tonight before it gets worse for you. No. Rosalind. No, she repeated, stronger. We made a deal. You signed papers. You're my husband now, legally and officially. If you run, it proves Sullivan right and costs me everything. She stepped closer. Besides, you haven't done anything wrong. Not here, not now. What happened in Pennsylvania? That's past. Past has a way of catching up. Then we'll face it when it does, together. That's what partners do. Silas studied her in the lamplight, something shifting behind his eyes. You're tougher than you look. I'd have to be. Now come on. Dinner's getting cold, and tomorrow we've got a ranch to save and a town full of gossips to prove wrong. They walked back to the house side by side, not quite touching, but no longer strangers either. The sky above them blazed with stars, indifferent and eternal, watching their small drama play out against the vast Wyoming darkness. Inside, Rosalind served a simple meal, beans, cornbread, coffee, and they ate in silence broken only by the clink of utensils and the tick of the old clock on the mantel. We should talk about sleeping arrangements, Rosalind said finally. Silas looked up. I can stay in the barn. No, people are already suspicious. If anyone comes by and finds you sleeping separate, it'll just fuel their doubts. She pushed her plate away. There's a bedroom upstairs. It's got a bed big enough for 2, and I can hang a blanket down the middle if you're uncomfortable. You're the one who should be uncomfortable. I'm the stranger invading your space. We're both strangers, Mr. Trent, just trying to figure out how to live in the same space without killing each other. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Fair enough, Mrs. Trent. They climbed the stairs to the bedroom her parents had shared, where her father had died 4 months ago after a slow decline that ate away his strength like rust-consuming iron. The bed was neatly made, the room sparse but clean. Rosalind hung a quilt down the middle of the bed, creating a barrier more symbolic than practical. Your side, my side. We'll manage. That night, lying in the darkness with a stranger breathing on the other side of a thin quilt, Rosalind stared at the ceiling and wondered what kind of fool marries a man running from violence to solve problems spawned by grief. But fools sometimes survived when wise people perished, and survival was all she had left to aim for. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Sullivan's gossip would spread, questions would multiply. The drought would continue, the debts would press, and the ranch would demand every ounce of strength they could muster. But tonight, for the first time since her father's death, Rosalind wasn't alone. She had a partner, however reluctant and temporary. It wasn't love. It wasn't even trust yet. But it was something. And sometimes something was enough to build on. The gossip hit town like wildfire in dry grass. By the time Rosalind drove the wagon to Henson's general store 3 days after the wedding, half of Broken Creek had already convicted Silas of crimes ranging from card fraud to murder. The other half was still deciding which rumors to believe. She felt the shift the moment she walked through the door. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Eyes tracked her movement down the aisles. Mrs. Patterson actually clutched her reticule closer, as if Rosalind might steal it. Morning, Rosalind said to the room at large. A chorus of mumbled greetings answered, none of them warm. Leonard Henson emerged from the storeroom, his expression carefully neutral. Mrs. Trent, what can I get for you today? Salt, lamp oil, and 20 pounds of flour if my credit's still good. About that. Henson wiped his hands on his apron, not meeting her eyes. I've been doing some accounting. Your father's outstanding balance, combined with recent purchases, it's getting substantial. I'm going to need to see some payment before extending more credit. Rosalind set her basket on the counter with deliberate care. Mr. Henson, you've known me since I was 12 years old. You know I'm good for it. It's not about you, it's about… He paused, choosing words. There are concerns about your situation, your marriage. Some folks are wondering if it's legitimate given the circumstances. The county accepted it. Reverend Mitchell performed it. What more legitimacy do you need? The county doesn't know what we know. This came from Mrs. Patterson, who'd apparently overcome her fear of proximity to Rosalind's supposed criminal influence. That man you married is wanted back east, card sharp and a brawler. Thomas Sullivan says there might even be a warrant. Thomas Sullivan is a gossip and a liar. Now, Rosalind, Henson started. Mrs. Trent, she corrected, her voice sharp as broken glass. I'm a married woman now. Show me that respect at least. Mrs. Trent, then. But the concerns are valid. If your husband is running from the law, that puts everyone who does business with you at risk. Rosalind wanted to scream, wanted to grab Henson by his pristine apron and shake him until some sense rattled into his skull. Instead, she counted to 5, the way her mother had taught her. My husband, she said slowly, got into a fight defending himself. He was accused of cheating when he won honestly. The men who attacked him are the criminals, not Silas. But none of you care about that, do you? You just want another reason to push me out. The silence that followed felt thick enough to choke on. No one's pushing you out, Henson said finally. But business is business. I need payment before I can extend more credit. That's just facts. Rosalind picked up her basket. Then I'll take my business elsewhere. There is nowhere else. Not for 30 miles. She knew that. He knew she knew. The whole store knew. But Rosalind walked out anyway, spine straight, refusing to let them see her break. Outside, she leaned against the wagon and breathed until the shaking stopped. 4 days married, and already the walls were closing in. Sullivan had done his work well. By questioning Silas's character, he'd poisoned her credit, her reputation, everything she'd been fighting to preserve. Mrs. Trent? Rosalind looked up to find Mary Parker approaching, carrying a basket of her own. For a moment, Rosalind expected more judgment, more careful distance, but Mary's expression held only concern. I heard what happened in there, Mary said quietly. My father's bank hasn't cut you off yet. If you need a small loan to tide you over. I can't take charity, Mary. It's not charity. It's a loan. With interest, if that makes you feel better. Mary glanced back at the store. Don't let them win, Rosalind. Don't let gossip destroy what you're trying to build. What if they're right? What if I made a mistake marrying him? Did you? Rosalind thought about Silas, the way he'd fixed the windmill despite his exhaustion, how he'd spent yesterday mending fence posts without being asked, how he'd slept on his side of the blanket partition without complaint, rising before dawn to start work while she made breakfast. No, she said, I don't think I did. Then fight for it. Fight for him. Fight for yourself. Mary pressed something into Rosalind's hand, a $20 bill. This is from me, not the bank. Pay me back when you can, or don't. Consider it a wedding gift. Before Rosalind could protest, Mary was walking away, disappearing into the general store where the gossips waited like vultures. Rosalind stared at the money in her hand, feeling something crack open in her chest. Kindness. She'd almost forgotten what it looked like. She drove home with supplies purchased from a smaller store on the edge of town, more expensive, lower quality, but the owner didn't ask questions. The $20 would stretch for a while if she was careful. It had to. When she reached the ranch, she found Silas in the north pasture, working on the fence line. He'd stripped to his undershirt despite the morning chill, sweat darkening the fabric between his shoulder blades. A pile of repaired posts stood beside him, testament to hours of labor. Town was bad? He asked without turning around. How'd you know? You're back early, and I can hear the anger and how hard you're not slamming that wagon brake. Despite everything, Rosalind almost smiled. Henson cut off our credit, said there are concerns about the legitimacy of our marriage. Half the town thinks you're a wanted criminal. Silas drove another post into the ground with savage force. They're not entirely wrong. You defended yourself. That's not a crime. Depends who's telling the story. He finally turned to face her. I'm making things worse for you. Maybe I should leave after all. We've had this conversation. You're not leaving. Rosalind, my name is Mrs. Trent. When we're in public, you might as well use it in private too. Get used to the sound. She climbed down from the wagon. We're partners. That means we face this together. Even when facing it means losing everything? I was going to lose everything anyway. At least this way I'm not alone. Something shifted in Silas's expression, hard walls cracking just enough to let light through. You're a stubborn woman. You're a stubborn man. We'll manage. She started unloading supplies. Come on, I bought bacon. Real bacon, not salt pork. We should eat it before it goes bad. They worked through the afternoon, Silas on the fences, Rosalind tending the vegetable garden that had gone mostly to seed. The physical labor helped quiet the voices in her head, the doubts that multiplied like weeds. As sunset painted the sky copper and gold, Rosalind heard hoofbeats approaching. Multiple riders this time, coming fast. Silas heard them too. He dropped the post he'd been carrying and moved to Rosalind's side, his body angling slightly in front of hers. Protective. She noticed that, filed it away for later consideration. 4 men rode into the yard. Rosalind recognized them all. Thomas Sullivan, his brother Frank, and 2 ranch hands from William Dalton's spread. They looked like trouble dressed in dusty work clothes and bad intentions. "Evening, Mrs. Trent," Thomas called out, all false politeness. "Mind if we have a word with your husband?" "I mind everything about this visit. State your business or leave my property." Now, that's not very hospitable. Thomas dismounted, his brother and the ranch hands following suit. "We just want to ask Mr. Trent here a few questions. Clear up some confusion about his past." "My past is none of your concern," Silas said. His voice stayed level, but Rosalind felt the tension radiating off him like heat from a forge. It becomes our concern when a wanted man marries into land ownership, makes folks nervous, makes them wonder if this whole arrangement is legal. The county says it's legal. That's all that matters. Frank Sullivan spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "County don't know what we know. About the card game, about the men you put in the hospital, about the warrant." "There's no warrant," Silas interrupted. "I was never charged with anything. The accusations were investigated and dropped. Check with the Pennsylvania authorities if you don't believe me." "That's convenient, real convenient." Thomas stepped closer. "See, we did some checking. Sent a telegram to Pittsburgh, talked to the sheriff there. He says the case was dropped because you disappeared before they could bring charges. Says if you ever come back, they'd be happy to arrest you for assault and fraud." Rosalind's stomach dropped. "That's not what you said." "I said I wasn't charged. I didn't say they didn't want to charge me." Silas's jaw worked. "I left because staying meant fighting a battle I couldn't win. The man I played cards with, the one who accused me, his family owns half of Pittsburgh. The sheriff, the judge, probably the prosecutor too. I could have stayed and gone to prison for defending myself, or I could leave and start over. I chose to leave." "So you're a coward and a criminal," Frank said. "I'm a man who knows when the game's rigged." Thomas smiled, and it was the ugliest thing Rosalind had seen in a long time. "Well, Mr. Trent, seems to me you've rigged yourself another game here. Married a desperate woman, claimed half her land, and now you're probably planning to sell it out from under her once the title clears." "That's a lie," Rosalind said. "Is it? How well do you actually know this man?" Thomas turned his attention to her. "You married him after what? A day of acquaintance? Signed over half your property to a stranger? That doesn't sound like the smart girl James Chen raised." "My father would have understood desperation. He married my mother despite everyone telling him not to. Seems to me he had good instincts about character." "Your father died broke and alone. Not sure that's the example you want to follow." Rosalind felt Silas tense beside her, felt his hands curl into fists. She put a hand on his arm, a warning and a plea. "You've said your piece," she told Thomas. "Now get off my land before I get my rifle and make you leave." "Easy now. We're just concerned neighbors." Thomas remounted his horse, the others following. "But mark my words, Mrs. Trent. This arrangement of yours, it won't stand. The county's going to take another look at that marriage license. And when they do, when they realize you married a fugitive just to keep your land, they're going to void the whole thing. Then where will you be?" They rode off, leaving dust and threats hanging in the air like gun smoke. Rosalind waited until they were out of sight before she let herself shake. "Is it true? What he said about the charges?" "Mostly, they wanted to charge me. The evidence was thin, just accusations and the word of men whose stories kept changing. But in Pittsburgh, evidence doesn't matter as much as influence." Silas's voice was flat, emotionless. "I left before they could manufacture enough to stick." Why didn't you tell me? Would it have changed anything? Rosalind wanted to say yes, wanted to claim she would have made a different choice, chosen a safer path. But standing there in the fading light, looking at her failing ranch and remembering Dalton's offer to save her in exchange for everything that mattered, she knew the truth. No, she said, I still would have married you. Even knowing I might bring the law down on both our heads? Even knowing that, she turned to face him fully. But from now on, no more secrets. If there's something that could hurt us, I need to know. We can't fight threats we can't see. Silas nodded slowly. Fair enough. Your turn then. What aren't you telling me? Rosalind hesitated. There were things she'd buried deep, things she didn't like examining even in private. But he was right. If they were going to survive this, they needed truth between them. My father didn't just die broke, she said quietly. He died owing money to some dangerous people, not just merchants. There was a man in Cheyenne, a loan shark who fronted him cash for a cattle buy that went bad. Pa couldn't pay him back, and the interest kept mounting. Before he died, this man, his name's Caleb Cross, he sent word that he'd be coming to collect, one way or another. How much? $500, plus interest. Probably closer to $700 now. Silas whistled low. That's more than the ranch is worth. I know. I've been hoping Cross would forget, or that I could scrape together enough to at least negotiate. But if he comes, if he learns I'm married now, she swallowed hard. He might see you as a new source of payment. So we've got the county questioning our marriage, the town treating us like criminals, and a loan shark who might show up demanding money we don't have. That about covers it. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their combined disasters pressing down like a physical force. Then Silas laughed. Not a happy sound, but not entirely bitter either. Well, at least we're not bored. Despite everything, Rosalind felt her lips twitch. There's that. Come on, let's go inside. I'll make dinner tonight. You look exhausted. You can cook? I can make beans and cornbread without burning either. That's cooking, isn't it? They went inside together, and Rosalind realized this was becoming familiar. The rhythm of working side by side, the comfortable silence that had started to replace the awkward distance. It wasn't love, but it was partnership, and right now that felt more valuable than romance. Over dinner, they made plans. Rosalind would visit the county office again, make sure their marriage registration was ironclad, get copies of everything. Silas would write to the sheriff in Pittsburgh, get an official statement about the charges, or lack thereof. They'd gather evidence, build a case for their legitimacy, make it harder for Sullivan and his cronies to tear them down. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was something. That night, lying in bed with the quilt partition between them, Rosalind spoke into the darkness. Silas? Yeah? Thank you. For not running. For staying even when leaving would be easier. A long pause. Then, thank you for giving me a reason to stay. Morning came too early, announced by roosters and the pale light that turned the bedroom walls gray. Rosalind dressed quickly, quietly, trying not to wake Silas. But when she came downstairs, he was already in the kitchen, coffee brewing, eggs frying in the skillet. Couldn't sleep, he said by way of explanation. Figured I might as well be useful. They ate breakfast in silence, both of them chewing over thoughts too heavy for conversation. Rosalind was washing dishes when she heard a wagon approaching. Too early for visitors, too early for anything good. She looked out the window and felt her heart stop. Bernard Hutchins climbed down from an official county wagon, accompanied by a man Rosalind didn't recognize. Tall, thin, with wire-rimmed spectacles and a leather satchel that screamed lawyer or government official. Silas, she called, we've got company, official company. He joined her at the window, his expression darkening. You know them? Hutchins is the county clerk. The other one, no idea, but he's got that look. What look? The kind that means paperwork and trouble. They went outside together, presenting a united front. Hutchins had the decency to look uncomfortable. The thin man just looked coldly professional. Mrs. Trent? Mr. Trent? Hutchins nodded to each of them. This is Inspector Gerald Morrison. He's here from the territorial office in Cheyenne. There have been some questions raised about your marriage registration. What kind of questions? Rosalind kept her voice steady. Morrison opened his satchel, pulled out papers. The territorial office has received complaints suggesting your marriage may be fraudulent, entered into solely for the purpose of maintaining a land claim. I'm here to verify the legitimacy of your union. We filed all the proper paperwork. Reverend Mitchell performed the ceremony. It's legal. Legal and legitimate aren't always the same thing, Mrs. Trent. Morrison adjusted his spectacles. The law requires that homestead marriages be genuine, not arrangements of convenience designed to circumvent residency requirements. Silas stepped forward. With respect, Inspector, most marriages in this territory are arrangements of convenience. Half the homesteaders out here married strangers through newspaper advertisements. You questioning all of them, too? I'm questioning the ones that generate complaints. Morrison consulted his papers. According to reports, you and Mrs. Trent knew each other for less than 2 days before marriage. You have no shared history, no courtship period, no witnesses to an ongoing relationship. And you, Mr. Trent, have a questionable background that suggests you might be using this marriage for purposes other than genuine partnership. Those reports are lies spread by people who want our land, Rosalind said. Perhaps. That's what I'm here to determine. Morrison produced a notebook. I'll need to conduct interviews with both of you, separately. I'll also be inspecting the property to verify you're actually living as husband and wife. Rosalind's stomach twisted. You want to inspect our home? It's standard procedure in cases of suspected fraud. I'll need to see sleeping arrangements, personal effects, evidence of cohabitation. Morrison's expression didn't change. If your marriage is legitimate, you have nothing to worry about. But they had everything to worry about, and they all knew it. Morrison interviewed Rosalind first, asking questions designed to catch inconsistencies. How did she meet Silas? Why did she choose him? What were his habits, his preferences, his history? Rosalind answered carefully, sticking close to truth but filling gaps with plausible details. She described their partnership, their shared goals, the way they'd decided to face their problems together. And you share a bedroom? Morrison asked. We do. A bed? Rosalind felt her face heat. Yes. Forgive the indelicacy, but this is relevant. Do you share it as husband and wife? Or merely as roommates seeking to maintain an appearance? She wanted to tell him it was none of his business. Wanted to throw him off her property and damn the consequences. Instead, she met his eyes and lied. We share it as husband and wife. Morrison made a note, his expression giving nothing away. I'll need to verify that with Mr. Trent. He interviewed Silas next while Rosalind waited outside, pacing the yard like a caged animal. What was Silas telling him? Would their stories match? Had they prepared enough, rehearsed their history into something believable? After what felt like hours, Morrison emerged from the house. I'll need to inspect the bedroom now. Rosalind led him upstairs, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The bedroom looked lived in, at least. Silas's clothes hung beside hers in the narrow closet. His boots sat beside the door. The bed was unmade, sheets tangled from restless sleep. Morrison examined everything with methodical thoroughness. He noted the quilt partition, still hanging down the middle of the bed from last night, with particular interest. What's this? He asked. A blanket. It was my mother's. I hung it there for warmth. The lie felt clumsy on her tongue. Interesting place for it. Morrison made another note. Mr. Trent gave a different explanation, said it was for privacy, that you were both adjusting to sharing space. Rosalind's mind raced. Both things are true. We use it for warmth and privacy. Is that a crime? No, but inconsistency suggests dishonesty. Morrison closed his notebook. I've seen enough. I'll be filing my report with the territorial office. They'll review the evidence and make a determination about the validity of your marriage. How long will that take? Could be weeks, could be months. In the meantime, I suggest you both think carefully about the consequences of fraud. If the territory determines your marriage is illegitimate, you'll face penalties. Fines. Possible criminal charges. Loss of the land claim. He headed for the stairs. And Mrs. Trent? Next time someone wants to verify your marriage is real, make sure you and your husband tell the same lies. Hutchins waited by the wagon, looking miserable. I'm sorry, Rosalind, Mrs. Trent. I didn't want this. But once the complaints were filed, I had no choice. Who filed them? I can't say. Can't or won't. Hutchins climbed onto the wagon without answering. Rosalind and Silas watched them drive away, dust rising behind the wheels like smoke from a funeral pyre. We failed the test, Rosalind said. We didn't prepare well enough. The blanket. I should have taken it down before they arrived. I should have remembered what you told him versus what I said. Rosalind sank onto the porch steps. We're going to lose everything. Not because we can't work the land or pay the debts. Because we can't lie convincingly enough. Silas sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Then maybe we stop lying. What? The inspector said we need to make this marriage look real. So let's make it real. He turned to face her. Not legally. It already is that. But actually real. No more partition in the bed. No more separate sides, careful distance, pretending we're just business partners. If we're going to convince people we're married, we need to act married. Rosalind's mouth went dry. I'm talking about sharing space like people who chose each other, eating together, working together, sleeping in the same bed without a blanket wall between us. He paused. I'm not suggesting anything improper, just authenticity. Give them nothing to question. That's asking a lot. I know, but what choice do we have? Silas stood, offered her his hand. We can keep pretending and probably fail. Or we can commit to this partnership fully. And maybe, just maybe, convince them we're exactly what we claim to be. Rosalind looked at his outstretched hand. Calloused, scarred, offered without expectation. She thought about the alternative, losing the ranch, watching Dalton or someone like him claim her father's legacy, spending the rest of her life wondering what if. She took his hand. All right, we do this properly. No more half measures. That night, Rosalind took down the quilt partition. The fabric fell away easily, leaving the bed open and exposed. She and Silas stood on opposite sides, the mattress between them like a canyon they were choosing to cross. We don't have to rush this, Silas said. I know. Rosalind smoothed the sheets, buying time. But Morrison's right. We need to be consistent. We need to look like people who belong together. They settled into bed with careful inches between them, both lying stiff and awkward. Rosalind could feel the heat radiating from Silas's body, could hear his breathing in the darkness. It felt impossibly intimate and utterly strange. This is weird, Silas said. Profoundly weird, but necessary. Unfortunately. Rosalind stared at the ceiling. Tell me something true. Something that'll help me understand who you are. A long silence. Then, I had a sister, Sarah. She died of fever when she was 8. I was 10. I'd promised to take care of her and I failed. Rosalind turned her head to look at him. That wasn't your fault. Doesn't matter. I still carry it. His voice was rough. That's why I couldn't stay in Pittsburgh. When those men came after me in the alley, when I fought back, I wasn't defending myself. I was fighting everyone who'd ever taken something from me. My sister, my savings, my future. I put them in the hospital because I was tired of losing. I understand that. The anger. Yeah. My mother died giving birth to a son who didn't survive. My father never recovered. He loved me, but I always knew I was the wrong child. The one who lived when the one he wanted died. Rosalind swallowed hard. I spent my whole life trying to be good enough, strong enough, to make up for it. Never quite managed. Silas was quiet for a moment. Then his hand found hers in the darkness, fingers interweaving. You're good enough. More than. So are you. They fell asleep like that, hands clasped, sharing truths in the dark. When morning came, they woke still touching, and somehow the strangeness had lessened. Not gone, that would take time, but diminished enough to be bearable. The next week passed in a blur of work and worry. Silas repaired the barn roof, mended the fence line, got the windmill pumping water again. Rosalind tended the garden, managed the livestock, kept the house running. They fell into rhythms that felt almost natural. Coffee together at dawn, midday meals eaten side by side, evenings spent in quiet conversation. And at night, they shared the bed without partition, learning to exist in each other's space without flinching. The town watched them with suspicion and speculation. Sullivan's gossip had done its damage. But slowly, grudgingly, people started to adjust. The sight of Silas and Rosalind together became normal, expected. When they came to town for supplies, they walked close, his hand occasionally at the small of her back, her shoulder brushing his arm. Small touches that could have been performance, but increasingly felt real. Mary Parker noticed. "You look different," she said one afternoon, finding Rosalind at the post office. "Different how?" "Less like you're drowning, more like you found something to hold on to." Mary smiled. "He's good for you."
He's stubborn and secretive and carries more ghosts than a graveyard. So do you. Maybe that's why it works. Rosalind thought about that on the ride home. Maybe Mary was right. Maybe they fit together precisely because they were both damaged, both desperate, both fighting battles they couldn't win alone. When she reached the ranch, she found Silas in the yard chopping wood with systematic efficiency. He'd stripped to his undershirt again, muscles working beneath sun-darkened skin.
For the first time, Rosalind let herself really look at him. Not as a problem to solve or a partner to manage, but as a man. A complicated, troubled, occasionally infuriating man who'd chosen to stay when leaving would have been easier. He saw her watching and straightened. "What?" "Nothing, just thinking." "About?" "About how maybe this wasn't a mistake after all." Silas set down the axe, wiped his hands. "The marriage?" "All of it. The marriage, the partnership, the decision to fight instead of surrender." She climbed down from the wagon. "We might still lose. The inspector might rule against us. Sullivan might dig up more dirt. The drought might kill what's left of the herd, but at least we're losing together." That's a depressing way to look at it. It's an honest way. Rosalind moved closer. "And honesty's the only currency we've got left." Silas studied her face like he was seeing something new. Then he closed the distance between them and kissed her. Not the formal press of lips from their wedding day, but something real. Searching. Tentative, but genuine. When they broke apart, Rosalind's heart was hammering. "What was that?" "Honesty," Silas said. "I'm tired of pretending I'm not attracted to my own wife." "We agreed this was business." "We agreed a lot of things. Doesn't mean they can't change." He cupped her face with one rough hand. "I'm not saying we have to figure this all out today, but maybe we can admit there's something here. Something worth exploring." Rosalind should have said no. Should have maintained the careful distance they'd established, kept things simple and uncomplicated. But she was tired of simple. Tired of careful. She'd spent her whole life playing it safe and had ended up alone anyway. "All right," she said, "we explore it, but slowly. And if it doesn't work, then we go back to being business partners who happen to share a bed. Deal." They sealed it with another kiss, longer this time, and Rosalind felt something shift inside her. Permission, maybe. To want something beyond survival. To hope for more than just keeping her head above water. Later, preparing dinner together in the small kitchen, Rosalind caught herself humming. Actually humming, like some fool girl in a romance novel. Silas noticed and grinned. "That a happy sound?" "Don't let it go to your head. Wouldn't dream of it." He stirred the pot on the stove. "But for the record, I like it. The sound of you happy. Don't get used to it. We've still got problems stacked to the ceiling." "True, but right now in this moment we're managing. That's worth something." It was. Rosalind was learning that small victories counted. The windmill pumping water. The fence line repaired. A marriage that started as necessity evolving into something that might, possibly, eventually resemble a choice. They were eating dinner when they heard riders approaching again. This time it was just one man. But the horse was expensive, the saddle crafted from quality leather, and the rider sat with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. William Dalton had come calling again. Rosalind and Silas stood together on the porch, watching Dalton dismount with the practiced ease of a man who'd done it 10,000 times. He tied his horse to the post, removed his hat, and approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Evening, Rosalind. Trent." He nodded to each of them. "Hope I'm not interrupting dinner." "You are," Silas said flatly. "Then I'll be brief." Dalton pulled an envelope from his coat. "I've come with a business proposition. One I think you'll find interesting given your current circumstances." Rosalind crossed her arms. "We're not interested in anything you're selling, Mr. Dalton. Not even if it solves all your problems.
The debt, the drought, the questions about your marriage? He tapped the envelope against his palm. I've been doing some thinking. My original offer might have been too aggressive, so I'm revising it. Something more equitable. We said no. Hear me out, please. Dalton's voice took on a reasonable tone, the kind men used when they wanted you to think they were being generous. I know about the inspector's visit. The whole county knows. And I know the territorial office is reviewing your marriage registration. If they rule against you, you lose everything. But if you were to partner with me before that happens, I could intervene. I have connections in Cheyenne, friends who owe me favors. You're saying you can fix the investigation, Silas said. I'm saying I can make certain concerns disappear. For a price. Dalton opened the envelope, pulled out papers. Here's what I'm proposing. You deed me 40% of the ranch. Not half, 40. In exchange, I settle your father's debts, provide operating capital for the next year, and ensure the territorial office rules in your favor. You keep majority ownership, keep your home, and get the resources you need to actually make this place profitable again. Rosalind wanted to throw the papers in his face, wanted to tell him exactly where he could shove his generous offer. But 40% was better than losing everything. And they did need capital. The herd was failing, the drought showed no signs of breaking, and winter was coming with its own demands. What's the catch? She asked. No catch, just business. I get a share of a potentially valuable property. You get security and legitimacy. Everyone wins. Except we lose control, Silas said. 40% means you've got significant say in how this ranch runs. What we plant, what we sell, who we hire. We'd be working for you, just with our names still on the deed. Dalton's smile thinned. That's one way to look at it. Another way is that you'd be working with me, benefiting from my experience, my resources, my connections. Most people would consider that an advantage. Most people haven't been on the receiving end of your charity before, Rosalind said. I've seen how you operate, Mr. Dalton. You make offers that sound fair until you read the fine print. Then suddenly, fair becomes ownership and ownership becomes control. You're being unreasonable. I'm being careful. There's a difference. She descended the porch steps, moving closer to him. You want to help? Fine. Lend us the money at a fair interest rate. No strings, no ownership, just a standard loan. We'll pay you back with interest. Everyone still wins. I'm not a bank, Rosalind. Then we don't need your help. Dalton's expression hardened, the reasonable facade cracking. You're making a mistake, both of you. That inspector isn't going to rule in your favor. The evidence is too thin, the complaints too numerous. And when the territorial office voids your marriage, this land goes to auction. Who do you think has the capital to buy it? Who do you think has been waiting for exactly this opportunity? You've been behind this from the start, Silas said quietly. The complaints to the territorial office, Sullivan's rumors, all of it. I've been watching developments with interest. That's not a crime. Dalton folded the papers, returned them to the envelope. But I didn't create your problems. You did that yourselves. I'm just offering a solution before it's too late. Get off our land, Rosalind said. You'll regret this. Maybe, but it'll be our regret to own. She pointed toward his horse. Leave, now, before I get the rifle and help you along. Dalton mounted with stiff dignity, his face flushed with anger or embarrassment or both. When this falls apart, and it will, don't come crawling back. I won't be so generous twice. He rode off into the gathering darkness, and Rosalind felt her hands start shaking. Not from fear, from rage. The bastard had been orchestrating their downfall from the beginning, moving pieces on a board they hadn't even known they were playing on. We need to prove it, she said. Prove he's behind the complaints. If we can show the territorial office that the investigation was motivated by greed rather than genuine concern, they won't care. Silas's voice was heavy. Even if we prove Dalton filed the complaints, that doesn't make our marriage more legitimate. We still met and married within days. We still have no shared history. The facts don't change just because we expose his motives. Then what do? We keep working, keep building evidence that we're exactly what we claim to be, and we prepare for the possibility that it won't be enough. Rosalind looked at the ranch, her father's legacy, her mother's grave, everything she'd fought for. I can't lose this place. I won't. Then we fight harder. Silas took her hand, squeezed it. But we also need to be realistic.
Dalton's right about one thing. We're running out of time and options. If the territorial office rules against us, we need a backup plan. What kind of plan? I don't know yet, but we'd better figure it out fast. They went inside, the dinner growing cold on the table, and tried to salvage the evening. But the weight of Dalton's visit hung over them like storm clouds, darkening everything. That night, lying in bed, Rosalind found herself moving closer to Silas instead of maintaining careful distance. He noticed, shifted to accommodate her, and they ended up with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. It was the first time they'd held each other without pretense or performance, just two people seeking comfort in a world that offered precious little. "Tell me something good," she whispered. "Something that doesn't involve land or debt or inspectors." Silas was quiet for a moment, his hand moving absently through her hair. "When I was a kid, before the war, my father used to take me fishing. We'd wake up before dawn, walk down to this creek behind our house, and just sit there for hours. Didn't matter if we caught anything. It was the sitting that mattered, the quiet, the way the world looked new every morning, like anything was possible." "You miss him?" "Every day. He died at Gettysburg, took a rifle ball to the chest on the second day. I was there, watched it happen and couldn't do a damn thing to stop it." Rosalind tightened her hold on him. "I'm sorry." "Me too." His voice roughened. "That's why I fight so hard now. Why I won't run even when running makes sense. I watched too many people I loved disappear. I'm tired of losing." "We're not going to lose this time." "You can't promise that." "Maybe not, but I can promise we'll go down fighting if we do." Morning arrived with news that made Dalton's visit feel like a gentle warning compared to what was coming. Rosalind was feeding the chickens when she saw the stranger approaching on foot. He came from the east, walking the road with the steady pace of someone who'd covered serious distance. Tall, weathered, with cold eyes and a gun worn low on his hip. Everything about him screamed danger. Silas appeared from the barn, saw the stranger, and his whole body went tense. "Get in the house." "Who is he?" "Nobody good. Go. Now." But Rosalind stayed put, her hand finding the egg basket, like it could be used as a weapon. The stranger stopped at the property line, studying them both with the kind of assessment that turned people into numbers and weaknesses. "Silas Trent," he called out. "Been looking for you." "Who's asking?" "Name's Caleb Cross. I believe you're married to a woman who owes me money, substantial money." Rosalind's stomach dropped. The loan shark, her father's debt. She'd been so focused on the marriage investigation that she'd almost forgotten about this particular disaster. "The debt was my father's, not mine," she said. "Your father's dead. Debt passes to his estate, and you, as his sole heir, inherited that obligation along with this land." Cross smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. "I'm here to collect." "We don't have $700, Rosalind said. "Then we have a problem." Cross took a step onto the property. "See, I fronted your father that money in good faith. Expected repayment within 6 months. It's been over a year now, with interest compounding monthly. I'm a patient man, but patience has limits. Give us time. We'll get you the money." "How much time?" Rosalind did quick calculations in her head. The herd sale wouldn't happen until fall. The garden produce would bring maybe $50 over the summer. Even if they sold everything they owned, they'd be lucky to scrape together $300. 6 months, she said, knowing it was impossible. 1 month. And I want collateral. Something to ensure you don't disappear like your father tried to do before he got himself killed. Pa didn't try to disappear. He was sick. Sick or running, the result's the same. I'm out money. Cross's hand moved toward his gun, not threatening exactly, but not casual either. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over water rights to this property as collateral. If you pay the debt in full within 30 days, the rights revert to you. If not, I take the water, and you can try running cattle on dry land." "The water rights are worth more than $700, Silas said. "Consider it motivation to pay on time." Cross produced papers from his coat. "Sign here. Both of you, since you're married now. Makes it nice and legal." Rosalind looked into the papers, at the predatory gleam in Cross's eyes, and knew they were trapped. Without water, the ranch was worthless. But refusing to sign meant Cross could take them to court, tie up the property in litigation, make things even worse. We need to read it first, she said. Take your time. I'll wait right here. Cross settled onto a tree stump, looking comfortable, looking like he had all the time in the world while they scrambled to survive. Rosalind and Silas took the papers inside, spread them on the kitchen table, and read through the dense legal language. It was exactly what Cross had described: a lien on the water rights, enforceable if payment wasn't received within 30 days. We can't pay this, Rosalind said. Not in a month, not in 6 months, not without selling the entire ranch. Then we don't sign. We refuse and force him to take us to court. That takes time we don't have if we're tied up in litigation when the territorial office rules on our marriage. She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Silas paced the small kitchen, fury and helplessness warring across his face. There has to be another way. Name it. I could... He stopped. No, that's not an option. What? Tell me. I could wire Pittsburgh, contact the family of the man who accused me, offer to come back, face the charges, in exchange for money to settle this debt. That's insane. You'd go to prison. Maybe. Or maybe they'd be satisfied with an apology and some restitution. Either way, it might buy you time. No, Rosalind grabbed his arm. You're not sacrificing yourself for my father's mistakes. We'll find another way. What other way? We're backed into a corner here, Rosalind. Dalton wants the land. Cross wants his money. The territorial office wants proof we're legitimate. We can't fight all 3 battles at once. Then we prioritize. We sign Cross's papers, buy ourselves a month, and use that time to... She stopped, an idea forming. Wait, what if we sell part of the herd now instead of waiting for fall? Early sale means lower prices. Lower prices means some money instead of no money. If we can get even 300 or 400, that's better than nothing. We could negotiate with Cross, pay part of the debt, extend the deadline on the rest. Silas considered it. It's risky. We'd be depleting our assets right when we need them most. Everything's risky at this point. At least this way, we're making an active choice instead of just reacting to threats. They went back outside together. Cross hadn't moved, still perched on his stump like a patient vulture. We'll sign, Rosalind said, but we want modified terms. We'll pay you $400 within 30 days, the rest within 90. Interest frozen at current levels. Cross laughed. You think you're in a position to negotiate? I think you're in a position to get some of your money soon, or none of your money for months while we fight this in court. Your choice. Cross studied her with new interest. You've got spine, I'll give you that. More than your father did. He stood, brushed dirt from his pants. All right, 430 days, remainder in 90. But if you miss either payment, I take the water immediately. No grace period, no second chances. Agreed. They signed the papers, Cross witnessed them, and the deal was struck. As he walked away, disappearing back down the road, Rosalind felt like she'd just made a deal with something far more dangerous than a loan shark. She'd mortgaged their future on the hope that they could pull off a miracle. We need to round up the herd, she told Silas. Get them ready for sale, tomorrow if possible. Tomorrow's too soon. Then the day after, but we can't wait. Every day costs us money we don't have. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Silas rode out to check the cattle scattered across the pastures while Rosalind went through her father's records, calculating which animals could be sold without completely destroying their breeding program. It was brutal math. Every cow they sold now was future income they'd never see. By evening, they'd identified 20 head that could go to market. Not enough to raise $400 unless prices were better than expected, but close. They'd have to supplement with something. Maybe the wagon, maybe her mother's jewelry, something valuable enough to close the gap. I hate this, Rosalind said over a dinner neither of them had much appetite for. Watching everything Pa built get dismantled piece by piece. We're not dismantling, we're adapting. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like slow surrender. Silas reached across the table, took her hand. Your father built this place from nothing, created something out of dirt and sweat and sheer stubbornness. That doesn't disappear just because we have to make hard choices. The land is still here. The water, for now, is still ours. And we're still standing. Barely.
Barely counts, he squeezed her hand. Come on, let's get some sleep. Tomorrow we start figuring out how to pull off this miracle you've committed us to. But sleep didn't come easy. Rosalind lay awake long into the night, listening to Silas breathe beside her, feeling the weight of all their accumulated disasters pressing down. The marriage investigation, Dalton's schemes, Cross's debt, the failing herd, and the relentless drought. It was too much. Too many threats from too many directions. She must have slept eventually because she woke to find dawn creeping through the window and Silas already gone, his side of the bed cold. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find a note on the kitchen table. Gone to round up the herd, coffee's still warm, back by noon. S. Rosalind poured herself coffee, drank it standing at the window, watching the sun climb over the eastern hills. The day looked clear, hot, merciless. Perfect weather for cattle work if you didn't mind the heat. She was washing her cup when she heard the sound. Faint at first, then growing louder. Crackling, popping, the smell of smoke drifting through the open window. Rosalind ran outside and felt her heart stop. The barn was on fire. Flames climbed the north wall, spreading fast, feeding on dry wood and old hay. Black smoke poured from gaps in the roof, turning the morning sky dark. Inside, she could hear the horses screaming. She ran for the water pump, grabbed a bucket, started hauling water, but it was hopeless. The fire was too big, spreading too fast. By the time she'd thrown 3 buckets on the flames, the entire north wall was engulfed. The horses. She had to get the horses out. Rosalind soaked a blanket in water, wrapped it around herself, and plunged into the smoke. The heat was intense, stealing the air from her lungs. She couldn't see, couldn't breathe, could only follow the sound of terrified animals. She found the first stall by touch, fumbled with the latch, got it open. The horse bolted past her, nearly knocking her down in its panic to escape. She moved to the second stall, the third, releasing animals into chaos. Something crashed behind her, part of the roof giving way. Sparks rained down, burning through her blanket, searing her skin. She had to get out. Had to. Strong hands grabbed her, dragged her backward. Silas, appearing through the smoke like some avenging spirit, his face black with soot, pulling her toward safety. They burst out of the barn into clean air, both of them coughing, gasping. Silas threw her to the ground, rolled her to smother embers in her clothes. Pain bloomed across her shoulders where the sparks had landed, but she was alive. The horses milled in the yard, wild-eyed and trembling. All of them had made it out, that was something. But the barn was lost. They stood together and watched it burn, flames reaching toward the sky, consuming everything. Tools, hay, feed, tack, all of it turning to ash. How did this start? Rosalind's voice came out raw, damaged by smoke. It didn't start. It was set. Silas pointed to the ground near the barn's foundation. Smell that? Kerosene. Someone poured it along the wall, lit it up. Who would? But she knew. They both knew. This was a message, a warning. Step out of line, refuse the wrong offer, and worse things would happen. Dalton, Rosalind said, or Cross, or Sullivan and his friends. Could be any of them. Could be all of them working together. Silas's jaw worked. Doesn't matter who struck the match. What matters is they're escalating. They're trying to break us. They're succeeding. He gestured at the burning barn. We just lost our shelter for the animals, our tool storage, probably half our remaining feed. Even if we sell the herd tomorrow, we won't have anywhere to process them. No tack for riding, nothing. Rosalind wanted to cry, wanted to scream, wanted to burn down the whole damn town in retaliation. Instead, she just watched her father's barn collapse in on itself, timbers crashing, sparks rising like defeated prayers. We rebuild, she said finally. With what money? I don't know, but we don't quit. That's what they want. They want us broken and desperate enough to accept whatever scraps they offer. I won't give them the satisfaction. Silas looked at her like she was crazy. Maybe she was, crazy or stubborn or too damaged to know when to surrender. All right, he said. We rebuild, but first we need to report this. Get the sheriff involved, make it official. The sheriff won't care. He's probably in Dalton's pocket anyway. Maybe, but we document it anyway. Create a record. Because when this all shakes out, when we're standing in court or facing that inspector again, we need proof that we've been fighting against deliberate sabotage.
He was right. They needed evidence, documentation, anything that might shift the narrative from desperate fraud to victims of conspiracy. They left the barn to burn itself out. Nothing left to save anyway, and rode into town on the one remaining horse that wasn't too spooked to carry them both. Rosalind sat behind Silas, her arms around his waist, her burned shoulders screaming with every jostle. But she didn't complain. Pain was just another thing to endure. The sheriff's office sat next to the jail, a small building that smelled of tobacco and resignation. Sheriff Walt Granger looked up when they entered, his expression shifting from boredom to calculation. "Mrs. Trent, Mr. Trent, what brings you in?" "Someone burned our barn," Rosalind said. "This morning. Poured kerosene along the wall and lit it up while we were working." Granger leaned back in his chair. "You see who did it?" "No, but we found evidence of arson. Kerosene burns different than accidental fire." "Evidence of kerosene or evidence of arson? Those are different things." "Someone deliberately destroyed our property," Silas said. "That's arson by any definition." "Could be. Could also be you got careless with a lamp, tried to put it out with kerosene instead of water, made things worse." Granger shrugged. "Happens more than you'd think. We weren't anywhere near the barn when it started." "So you say, but I've got no witnesses saying otherwise. No evidence pointing to anyone specific. Just a barn that burned and two people looking for someone to blame." He pulled out a form, made some notes. "I'll file a report. Beyond that, there's not much I can do." "You could investigate," Rosalind said. "Talk to people. Find out who might have motive." "Motive? Half the county has motive to make trouble for you two. You're not exactly popular right now, what with the marriage questions and your husband's questionable past." Granger set down his pen. "My advice? Accept that accidents happen. Maybe even consider it a sign that you should take one of the offers people have been making. Get out while you still can." "That's not advice. That's a threat." "That's reality, Mrs. Trent. Sometimes reality and threats look the same." He stood, indicating the conversation was over. "I'll file the report. If I hear anything useful, I'll let you know, but don't expect miracles." They walked out into the harsh sunlight, both of them seething with frustration and helplessness. "He's working with them," Rosalind said. "Has to be. Nobody's that useless by accident." "Probably getting paid to look the other way." Silas helped her onto the horse. "Dalton's got the whole town sewn up. Sheriff, merchants, probably half the county office. We're fighting a machine, not just a man." "Then we break the machine." "How?" Rosalind didn't have an answer, not yet. But as they rode back to the ranch, passing fields gone brown from drought and fences that needed repair they couldn't afford, she felt something harden inside her. Resolve, maybe. Or just sheer bloody-minded refusal to surrender. They'd taken her mother, taken her father, tried to take her land through legal tricks and intimidation. Now they were burning her property, terrorizing her animals, pushing her toward collapse. But she was still standing, still fighting, and she was learning that sometimes the only way to win was to refuse to play by rules that were rigged against you from the start. When they got back to the ranch, the barn had burned down to smoldering rubble. The horses had scattered into the fields, frightened but alive. Silas set about trying to catch them while Rosalind assessed the damage. It was catastrophic. Everything they'd stored in the barn, gone. Tools her father had accumulated over 20 years. Saddles, bridles, ropes, the winter hay they'd been saving, feed for the chickens, all of it reduced to ash and twisted metal. She was sitting in the ruins when Mary Parker's wagon appeared, driving fast, raising dust. "I heard what happened," Mary said, climbing down. "The whole town's talking. Are you hurt?" "Burned a little. Nothing serious." "Let me see." Mary examined Rosalind's shoulders, clicking her tongue at the blisters. "You need these treated. Come inside." You need to let me help. For once in your stubborn life, let someone help." They went inside together, and Mary cleaned and bandaged the burns with competent efficiency. "My father wants to see you," she said while she worked. "He heard about the fire. He's concerned." Concerned or curious? Both, probably. But he's not like the others. He knows the sheriff's useless and Dalton's dangerous. He might actually help. Why would he? Mary was quiet for a moment. "Because he remembers your mother. She was kind to him once when his wife was sick. He's never forgotten that. It was such a small thing, such an insignificant kindness, But Rosalind was learning that small kindnesses sometimes mattered more than grand gestures. "All right," she said. "I'll talk to him." That evening, after Silas had managed to catch and calm most of the horses, after they'd eaten a grim dinner of beans and stale bread, Rosalind walked into town alone. The Parker house sat on the good side of Broken Creek, white-clabbered with a proper porch and glass windows that caught the sunset. Robert Parker answered the door himself, a tall man gone gray, with kind eyes and the careful manner of someone who'd learned to choose words wisely. "Mrs. Trent, thank you for coming. Please sit." He gestured to chairs on the porch. "Mary told me about the fire. I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry. Nobody's helpful." "Fair point." Parker settled into his chair with a sigh. "I won't waste your time with pleasantries. I know what's happening. Dalton's trying to force you out. He's got the sheriff looking the other way, the merchants cutting your credit, and now someone's resorting to arson. It's organized, deliberate, and illegal as hell. But you can't stop it." "I'm a banker, not a lawman, but I can make things harder for him." Parker pulled out papers. "I've been reviewing your father's accounts. The debts aren't as bad as people think. Most of the merchants will settle for 50 cents on the dollar if payment's guaranteed. I can facilitate that." "I don't have 50 cents on the dollar." "You will, when you sell your cattle. I've also contacted a buyer in Cheyenne. A friend of mine runs a meat processing operation. He's willing to pay fair market price for healthy stock. No questions asked. That should net you enough to pay Cross's first installment and settle most of the merchant debts." Rosalind felt tears prick her eyes. Actual help. Real, practical assistance with no apparent strings attached. "Why are you doing this?" "Because your mother was good to my wife when she was dying. Sat with her, held her hand, didn't care that other people whispered about associating with a Chinese woman. That kind of kindness, you don't forget it." He handed her the papers. "These are letters of introduction to my buyer contact. Take them, use them, get yourself on solid financial ground. And the marriage investigation. Can you help with that?" Parker's expression darkened. "That's harder. Inspector Morrison is honest, which makes him immune to pressure. He'll rule based on evidence alone. You need to give him evidence he can't ignore." "We're trying, but everything we do, someone sabotages." "Then maybe stop trying to prove your marriage is real and start making it real." Parker looked at her seriously. "I've watched you and Trent around town, the way you move together, the small touches, the looks when you think nobody's watching. That's not all performance. There's something genuine there. Lean into that. Let it show. Make it so obvious that even Morrison has to acknowledge it. And if it's not enough, then you'll have tried everything, but at least you'll have each other. That's more than most marriages in this territory can claim." Rosalind walked home through the darkness, Parker's words echoing in her head. Make it real. Stop performing and start living it. She found Silas in the yard, staring at the burned remnants of the barn. "Parker's helping us," she said. "He's got a buyer for the cattle, willing to pay fair prices. We might actually pull this off." "That's good news." But Silas didn't sound relieved. He sounded exhausted. "What's wrong?" "I'm tired, Rosalind. Tired of fighting. Tired of watching everything we build get torn down. Tired of wondering if tomorrow brings another disaster we can't survive." She moved closer, took his hand. "Then let's stop fighting for tonight. Just for tonight, let's pretend none of this exists. No debts, no inspectors, no loan sharks. Just us." Silas looked at her, really looked, and something shifted in his eyes. "Just us." They went inside together, climbed the stairs to their bedroom, and for the first time since they'd married, they came together without pretense or hesitation. It wasn't romantic or gentle or any of the things stories promised. It was desperate and real and born from shared trauma and genuine need for comfort. And when morning came, lying tangled together in sheets damp with sweat, Rosalind realized Parker had been right. This marriage had become real. Somewhere between the disasters and the daily survival, between the threats and the small kindnesses, they'd stopped pretending and started actually being partners. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the first solid ground she'd stood on in months. The cattle drive started 3 days later, at first light when the air still held some mercy. 20 head wasn't much of a herd, but moving them the 40 miles to the railhead in Cheyenne required careful planning and harder work. Silas rode point while Rosalind brought up the rear, both of them pushing animals that had grown lazy on open range. The first day passed without incident. They made camp that evening beside a creek that ran shallow but clean, the cattle settling to graze while Rosalind built a fire and Silas tended the horses. The routine felt almost normal, like they'd been doing this together for years instead of weeks. "You ever driven cattle before?" Silas asked over coffee and jerky. "A few times with Pa. Never this far." Rosalind stretched her legs toward the fire, feeling every mile in her muscles. "You?" "Once. Railroad job. Moving stock from one camp to another. Lost half of them to a stampede when some idiot fired a gun too close to the herd." He shook his head at the memory. "Learned to respect cattle that day. They're smarter than they look and a hell of a lot more dangerous. These are gentle enough, long as we don't spook them." Famous last words. But the herd stayed calm through the night, and they set out again at dawn, making good time across open country. By midday of the second day, they could see Cheyenne rising from the plains like a mirage. Buildings, smoke, the glint of rail tracks catching sunlight. Parker's contact met them at the stockyards, a weathered man named Henderson who assessed the cattle with the quick efficiency of someone who'd bought and sold thousands. He pointed out weaknesses Rosalind already knew about. The thin cows, the ones showing signs of disease, the calves that should have been bigger. "I can give you 300 for the lot," Henderson said. "These are quality animals, worth at least 400. Quality animals 3 months ago, maybe. Right now they're drought-stressed and underfed. 300 is fair, Mrs. Trent. More than fair, considering." Rosalind wanted to argue, but she'd seen the books, knew what cattle were fetching these days. Henderson was offering a decent price, probably better than she'd get anywhere else. "350, and you've got a deal." Henderson studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "350, but only because Parker vouched for you." They shook on it, and Henderson counted out cash that felt almost obscene in its thickness. $350. More money than Rosalind had held since her father died. Enough to pay Cross's first installment, with some left over for supplies. They completed the sale paperwork, signed everything in triplicate, and Henderson's men began moving the cattle into holding pens. Just like that, a significant piece of their herd was gone. Rosalind felt the loss physically, like watching parts of herself being led away. "We did what we had to," Silas said quietly. "I know. Doesn't make it easier." They spent that night in a boarding house in Cheyenne, paying for a real room with a real bed and hot water for washing. It felt like impossible luxury after weeks of scraping by. Rosalind soaked her burned shoulders in a basin of warm water while Silas counted and recounted their money, making sure it was all there. 300 to Cross leaves us 50, he said. Barely enough for supplies and the merchant debts. We'll make it stretch, we always do. There's stretching, and then there's breaking. We're getting close to the breaking point. Rosalind dried off, pulled on a clean shift, the only clean clothes she'd brought. Then we don't break, we bend instead. How philosophical. But Silas smiled when he said it, and that smile still had the power to make her stomach flip. They shared the bed that night with an easiness that would have seemed impossible a month ago. Somewhere between the disasters and the daily grind of survival, they'd grown comfortable with each other's bodies, each other's presence. It wasn't perfect. Silas snored sometimes and Rosalind stole the blankets. But it was real, and real was all they had. The journey back took longer. Without cattle to push, they could have ridden straight through, but the horses needed rest, and so did they. They stopped at a creek to water the animals, and Rosalind found herself sitting on the bank with her boots off, feet dangling in cold water. "You think Morrison will rule in our favor?" she asked. Silas sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I think it depends on what evidence surfaces between now and his decision. Right now we're 50-50. Could go either way. Not the reassurance I was hoping for." "You want reassurance or honesty?" "Both, either. I don't know anymore." Rosalind kicked at the water, watching ripples spread. "I'm tired of everything being a fight. Tired of waking up wondering what fresh hell the day will bring." "Welcome to marriage," she laughed despite herself. "Is that what they teach you about marriage? That it's just one fresh hell after another?" "That's what experience teaches. My parents fought like cats in a sack most days, but they stayed together 30 years, raised 4 kids, built something that lasted." He paused.
Maybe that's what marriage is. Not the absence of hell, but having someone to face it with. That's depressing. Or realistic. Depends how you look at it. They rode back into Broken Creek at sunset 3 days after leaving, their pockets lighter, but their obligations closer to manageable. The ranch looked smaller somehow, diminished by the burned barn and scattered equipment, but it was still standing, still theirs. Caleb Cross appeared the next morning like he'd been watching for their return. Rosalind handed over $300 in cash, counted carefully, while Cross examined each bill with the attention of a jeweler appraising diamonds. "First payment received," he said, producing a receipt. 90 days for the remainder. Don't be late." "We won't be." "See that you're not." "I'm not a patient man, Mrs. Trent. And next time there won't be negotiations." He left, and Rosalind felt a small measure of relief. One threat temporarily neutralized. It wasn't victory, but it was breathing room. She and Silas spent the rest of that week settling merchant debts. 50 cents on the dollar, just as Parker had arranged. Henson took his payment with visible reluctance, like it physically pained him to accept anything from her. The other merchants were more gracious, some even apologetic about cutting off credit. "Times are hard for everyone," Mrs. Patterson said, though her eyes didn't quite meet Rosalind's. "No hard feelings, I hope." "None at all," Rosalind lied, and took her receipt. By week's end, they'd cleared most of the immediate debts and had maybe $20 left for supplies. It was a precarious position, but better than bankruptcy. They were eating dinner, beans again because beans were cheap and filling, when someone knocked. Hard, official, the kind of knock that meant trouble. Rosalind opened the door to find Inspector Morrison standing there with Bernard Hutchins and a woman she didn't recognize. Middle-aged, severe-looking, carrying a leather portfolio. "Mrs. Trent, Mr. Trent." Morrison's expression was unreadable. "May we come in?" "Do we have a choice?" "Not really, no." They filed into the small house, Morrison and Hutchins taking seats at the table while the woman remained standing, observing everything with sharp eyes. "This is Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore," Morrison said. "She's been assigned to assist with the marriage investigation. She specializes in cases of potential fraud." The word hung in the air like gun smoke. "We're not frauds," Rosalind said. "That's what we're here to determine." Mrs. Whitmore opened her portfolio, pulled out papers. "I've reviewed Inspector Morrison's initial findings. I've also conducted my own investigation. Interviewed townspeople, examined financial records, reviewed the circumstances of your marriage. And I have concerns." "What kind of concerns?" "The kind that suggests this marriage was entered into solely for financial gain. That you, Mrs. Trent, married Mr. Trent to satisfy homestead requirements. And you, Mr. Trent, agreed in exchange for land ownership. That's fraud. Explicit, provable fraud." "We married because we wanted to," Silas said. "Did you? Or did you marry because Mrs. Trent was desperate and you were convenient?" Mrs. Whitmore's voice was cold, clinical. "I've spoken with multiple witnesses who say you knew each other less than 48 hours before the ceremony, that you had no courtship, no prior relationship, no evidence of genuine affection. The preacher himself expressed doubts about the legitimacy." "Reverend Mitchell performed the ceremony," Rosalind said. "He wouldn't have done that if he thought it was fraud. He performed it because you asked him to, and he's a man of faith who wants to believe the best of people. But belief doesn't override legal requirements." Morrison cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitmore, perhaps we should—" "No. They need to understand the severity of this situation." She turned back to Rosalind and Silas. "If we determine this marriage is fraudulent, you'll lose the land immediately. You'll also face criminal charges, fraud, conspiracy to defraud the government, possibly perjury depending on what you told county officials. We're talking prison time, not just fines." The room felt like it was shrinking. Rosalind reached for Silas's hand under the table, found it, held tight. "What do you want from us?" she asked. "The truth, unvarnished, complete honesty." Mrs. Whitmore sat down, fixing them both with a look that could cut glass. "Tell me why you really married. Not the story you've been telling, but the actual reason. Because I promise you, I'll find out anyway. The only question is whether you cooperate or force me to dig until I've destroyed whatever you're trying to protect." Rosalind looked at Silas.
He looked back, and in his eyes she saw the same calculation running. Tell the truth and face certain consequences, or lie and hope they couldn't prove otherwise. But Mrs. Whitmore was right. The truth had a way of surfacing, and if they were caught in a lie now, it would be so much worse. All right, Rosalind said. The truth. I was going to lose the ranch. County regulations required a married homesteader. I didn't have time to find someone through normal courtship, so I made Silas a business proposition. Marriage in exchange for part ownership. We signed papers, made it legal, intended to maintain the arrangement as long as necessary. So it was fraud. It was survival. There's a difference. Not in the eyes of the law. Mrs. Whitmore made notes. Mr. Trent, do you confirm this account? I do, but it's not the whole story. Silas's voice was steady. We started as a business arrangement, but things changed. Living together, working together, facing all the disasters that keep coming, it stopped being pretense. We became actual partners, actual husband and wife. When did this transformation supposedly occur? There wasn't a specific moment. It was gradual, small things adding up. He squeezed Rosalind's hand. By the time we realized what was happening, it was already real. Mrs. Whitmore's expression didn't change. How convenient. A fraudulent marriage that became genuine just in time for an investigation. Believe what you want, Rosalind said. But we're telling the truth. We married for practical reasons that became personal ones. That's not fraud. That's just how life works sometimes. In your opinion. In anyone's honest opinion. How many marriages in this territory started as arrangements of convenience? How many homesteaders married strangers through advertisements? Are you investigating all of them too? I'm investigating the ones that generate complaints, and yours generated several, all very detailed, all raising legitimate concerns. Complaints filed by people who want our land, people who've been sabotaging us, burning our property, trying to force us into surrendering. Rosalind's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. This investigation isn't about fraud. It's about giving them legal cover to steal what they couldn't take through intimidation. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. William Dalton has been orchestrating this from the start. He wants our water rights, so he's using your investigation as a weapon. Mrs. Whitmore closed her portfolio. If you have evidence of conspiracy, present it. Otherwise, these are just accusations designed to deflect from your own illegal actions. We don't have evidence because the sheriff won't investigate. He's in Dalton's pocket, same as half this town. Then you're admitting you have no proof. We're admitting the system is rigged. There's a difference. Morrison stood, looking uncomfortable. Mrs. Whitmore, I think we've heard enough for tonight. Perhaps we should make our position clear. Mrs. Whitmore stood as well, gathering her things. Based on the evidence, I'm recommending the territorial office void this marriage. The homestead claim will be forfeit, the land will go to auction, and both of you will face charges of fraud. You have 7 days to vacate the property. The words hit like bullets. 7 days. Everything they'd fought for, everything they'd survived, reduced to 7 days. You can't do that, Rosalind said. I can, and I am. The paperwork will be filed tomorrow. Mrs. Whitmore moved toward the door, Hutchins following like a shadow. I suggest you use the time to make arrangements. Find somewhere else to live. Secure legal representation if you can afford it, because this is over. They left, Morrison lingering just long enough to mouth, I'm sorry, before following the others out. Rosalind and Silas sat in the empty house, the weight of the verdict crushing down. 7 days, Rosalind said. That's all we get. We could fight it, appeal the decision, hire a lawyer. With what money? We're broke, Silas. We sold the cattle, paid the debts, and we've got maybe $20 left. That won't buy us an hour with a decent lawyer, let alone a court battle. Then we run, pack up tonight, disappear before they can file the charges. Run where? We've got nothing. No money, no prospects, nowhere to go. Rosalind felt something break inside her, something that had been bending for weeks. I can't lose this place. I can't. I know. My parents are buried here. My whole life is here. If we lose the ranch, I lose everything that matters. Silas pulled her close, and she let herself cry against his chest. Deep, ugly sobs that had been building since her father's death, since the first eviction notice, since the moment she'd realized the world didn't care about fairness or justice or how hard you fought. They held each other in the darkness while the clock ticked away their remaining time. Morning brought no relief, just harsh sunlight exposing all the ways they'd failed. Rosalind went through the motions of chores, feeding the remaining animals, collecting eggs, trying to maintain normalcy in a situation that was anything but normal. She was in the garden when a wagon appeared, driving fast. For a moment she thought it was Dalton, coming to gloat, but as it got closer, she recognized Mary Parker. "I heard," Mary said, jumping down before the wagon fully stopped. "The whole town heard. Morrison and Mrs. Whitmore were at the hotel last night, celebrating like they'd won some great victory." "They did win. 7 days and we're out. That's why I'm here." Mary pulled a small purse from her pocket. "This is everything I've saved, about $100. Take it. Use it to fight them." "Mary, I can't." "You can, and you will. Because if they do this to you, they'll do it to everyone who doesn't fit their idea of acceptable. Every woman who dares to own property, every person who challenges their control. You're not just fighting for your ranch, Rosalind. You're fighting for all of us." Rosalind took the purse with shaking hands. "This is too much. Your savings will be meaningless if we let people like Dalton and Mrs. Whitmore decide who deserves to keep what they've earned. Take it. Find a lawyer. File an appeal. Do something. I don't even know where to start. Then figure it out. You're the smartest, most stubborn person I know. If anyone can find a way through this, it's you." Mary climbed back onto her wagon. "And Rosalind, stop being so damn proud. Let people help. You're not alone in this fight." She drove off, leaving Rosalind standing in the garden with $100 and the first real hope she'd felt in days. She found Silas in what remained of the barn, salvaging tools from the rubble. "We've got money, Mary's savings. Enough to hire a lawyer, maybe file an appeal." "Where are we going to find a lawyer willing to take on the territorial office?" "I don't know, but we're going to try." Rosalind tucked the purse in her pocket. "Because the alternative is surrendering, and I'm done with that. Even if we lose, even if they take everything, I want them to know we fought back." Silas set down the charred shovel he'd been examining. "All right, then we fight. But we do it smart. We find leverage, something they can't ignore." "What kind of leverage?" "The kind that proves Dalton's been orchestrating this. If we can connect him to the complaints, to the fire, to any of the sabotage, if we can prove conspiracy, it changes everything." "How do we prove that?" "Same way you prove anything. We gather evidence, talk to people, find someone willing to testify." His expression hardened. "And if we can't find evidence legally, we find it another way." "You're talking about breaking the law." "I'm talking about fighting fire with fire. They burned our barn, destroyed our property, used the legal system as a weapon. Maybe it's time we stopped playing by rules they've already broken." Rosalind knew he was right, knew that fighting fair against people who cheated was just another way of losing. But crossing that line meant becoming something she'd promised herself she'd never be. Then again, she'd promised a lot of things that circumstances had forced her to break. "What did you have in mind?" she asked. "Sullivan. He's the weakest link. He started the rumors, filed the complaints, did Dalton's dirty work. But he's not smart enough or loyal enough to keep his mouth shut under pressure. If we can get him talking, get him to admit who paid him, who ordered what, we'd have everything we need." "And how do we get him talking?" Silas smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We scare him. We make him understand that protecting Dalton is more dangerous than betraying him. That's not evidence. That's intimidation. It's survival, and right now, that's all that matters." They spent that day making plans, working through scenarios, preparing for what might be their last chance. As darkness fell, they rode into town together, two people with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The Silver Dollar Saloon was busy that night, full of ranch hands and drifters spending wages on whiskey and cards. Thomas Sullivan sat at his usual table in the back, drunk enough to be loud, but not enough to be senseless. Rosalind and Silas approached from different directions, cutting off escape routes. Sullivan saw them coming, and his expression shifted from confusion to fear. "We need to talk," Silas said quietly. "Outside. Now." "I don't have anything to say to you." "Then you can listen." Silas's hand moved to Sullivan's shoulder, gripped tight enough to bruise. "Outside. Or we have this conversation right here in front of everyone." Sullivan stood, stumbling slightly, and let himself be guided toward the back door. Rosalind followed, her heart pounding, wondering if they were about to cross a line they couldn't uncross. In the alley behind the saloon, Silas shoved Sullivan against the wall. "Who paid you to spread rumors about me? Who told you to file complaints with the territorial office?" "Nobody. I did it on my own." "Liar." Silas leaned in close. "I know Dalton's behind this. I know he's been pulling strings, using you and others to destroy us. What I don't know is how much he paid you to sell your soul. You're crazy. Dalton doesn't—" Silas's fist connected with Sullivan's stomach, driving the air from his lungs. "Wrong answer. Try again." "Silas," Rosalind started, but he cut her off. "This man helped burn our barn, helped file false complaints that are destroying our lives. He doesn't get to hide behind lies anymore." He grabbed Sullivan's collar. "Last chance. Tell me everything, and maybe I don't break your jaw like those men in Pittsburgh tried to break mine." Sullivan's face went pale. $50. Dalton paid me $50 to spread stories about your past, to get people talking. He said it was just to make you uncomfortable, get you to leave on your own." "What else?" "The complaints. He wrote them. I signed them. Said it was for everyone's protection, keeping criminals from stealing land." "And the fire?" "That wasn't me. I swear, that was—" Sullivan stopped, realizing what he'd been about to say. "Who? Say the name." "Frank. My brother Frank. Dalton gave him $100 to burn the barn, make it look like an accident." Rosalind felt cold fury wash over her. "You're going to testify to all this. You're going to tell Morrison and Mrs. Whitmore exactly what you just told us. They'll never believe me? It's my word against Dalton's. Then we make them believe you." Silas released Sullivan, stepped back. "Because if you don't testify, if you let them void our marriage and take our land, I promise you, what I did to those men in Pittsburgh will look gentle compared to what I'll do to you." It was a bluff. Rosalind knew it was a bluff. But Sullivan didn't, and that made all the difference. "All right," he said. "All right. I'll testify. Just leave me alone." They left him in the alley and walked back to their horse, neither of them speaking until they were well away from town. "That was risky," Rosalind said finally. "It was necessary. You threatened him, assaulted him." "I did what had to be done to save us." Silas's voice was flat. "You want to condemn me for it? Go ahead, but don't pretend we had any other choice." Rosalind didn't answer. Because he was right. They'd been backed into a corner where the only options were surrender or fight dirty. And she'd chosen to fight. Tomorrow they'd take Sullivan to Morrison. Tomorrow they'd present evidence of conspiracy. Tomorrow they'd find out if the truth mattered more than power. But tonight, riding home through darkness with the man she'd married for convenience and come to love through necessity, Rosalind allowed herself to hope. Just a little. Just enough to keep going. Thomas Sullivan didn't show up the next morning. Rosalind and Silas waited at the county office for 2 hours, watching the clock tick away their remaining time. Morrison arrived at 9, Mrs. Whitmore at 9:30, both of them looking irritated at being summoned. "You said you had new evidence," Morrison said. "Where is it?" "We have a witness, Thomas Sullivan. He's going to testify that William Dalton paid him to file false complaints, to spread rumors, to sabotage our property." Rosalind glanced at the door again, willing Sullivan to appear. "He'll be here." "It's nearly 10. How long do you expect us to wait?" He was scared last night. Probably needed time to work up the courage. Mrs. Whitmore's expression was skeptical, bordering on contemptuous. "Or perhaps this witness doesn't exist. Perhaps you're manufacturing evidence because you know your case is hopeless." "He exists. He agreed to testify." "Under what circumstances did he agree? Did you perhaps threaten him, coerce him?" Her eyes narrowed. "Because that would be witness tampering, another crime to add to your growing list." Silas stepped forward. "We didn't tamper with anything. We just asked him to tell the truth." "I'm sure you did. Very persuasively, I imagine." Mrs. Whitmore gathered her papers. "Inspector Morrison, I think we've wasted enough time here. These people are desperate and grasping at straws. I recommend we proceed with filing the fraud charges today rather than waiting out the week." "Wait," Rosalind's voice cracked. "Please, just give us until this afternoon. Let us find Sullivan, bring him here properly. If he doesn't show by 3 o'clock, We'll accept your ruling without further contest." Morrison looked at Mrs. Whitmore, who shrugged. "Fine. 3 o'clock, but not a minute later. And if your witness fails to appear, we file immediately. Understood?" "Understood." They rode into town at full gallop, the horse lathered with sweat by the time they reached Sullivan's boarding house. The landlady answered the door with a sour expression. "Sullivan's gone. Packed up and left before dawn. Said something about visiting family in Colorado." "Did he say when he'd be back?" "Didn't sound like he was planning to come back at all." She started to close the door. "Left owing me 2 weeks' rent, the bastard." Rosalind and Silas stood on the street, watching their last hope evaporate like morning dew. "Dalton got to him," Silas said. "Paid him more to disappear than we scared him into staying. Or threatened him worse than we did." Rosalind felt exhausted down to her bones. "Either way, he's gone. And without his testimony, we've got nothing. We've got until 3 o'clock. "To do what?" "Sullivan was our only lead. Without him, we can't prove Dalton's involvement. Can't prove the conspiracy. Can't prove anything except that we're exactly what they say we are. Desperate people who married for land." Silas took her hand. "Then we give them something they can't ignore. Something so public, so undeniable, that it forces them to see us as real." "Like what?" "Like the truth. The whole truth. Not just the parts we've been hiding." He pulled her toward the center of town. "Come on. If we're going down, we're going down honest." The town square sat empty in the midday heat, just a few people moving between buildings. Silas led Rosalind to the steps of the bank, the highest point, the most visible location, and turned to face the sparse crowd. "Can I have your attention?" he called out. A few people stopped, a few more. Mary Parker emerged from the general store, her expression curious. Within minutes, a small crowd had gathered, drawn by curiosity or boredom or the universal human instinct to witness disaster. "Most of you know me," Silas said, his voice carrying across the square. "Silas Trent, the drifter who married Rosalind Chen to steal her land, the criminal running from charges back east, the fraud who's been lying to you all for weeks." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Rosalind squeezed his hand, not sure where he was going with this. "And most of you are right. I did come here running from trouble. I did marry Rosalind for practical reasons. When she offered me half her ranch in exchange for making her marriage legitimate, I saw an opportunity and I took it." He paused. "That's the truth. The part everyone's been saying behind our backs. The part that's probably going to cost us everything." "Then why are you admitting it?" someone called out. "Because the whole truth is more complicated than that simple version. Yeah, we married for practical reasons. But somewhere between signing those papers and right now, something changed. We stopped pretending and started actually being married. Started being partners. Started caring about each other more than we cared about the land or the legal requirements or any of it." He turned to Rosalind. "I didn't expect to fall in love with you. Didn't plan on it. Didn't want the complication. But here we are. And I'd rather lose everything honestly than keep it through deception." Rosalind felt her throat tighten. He'd never said those words before. Never said love. They danced around it, implied it through action, but never spoken it out loud. "I love you too," she said, and damn if her voice didn't break on it. "And he's right. We started this as a business arrangement, but it became real. Not because we needed it to for legal purposes, but because we chose each other. Every day, through every disaster, we kept choosing each other." She turned to face the crowd. "William Dalton has been trying to take this ranch from the moment my father died. He's used the legal system, intimidation, sabotage, everything he could think of to force us out. And he's winning because the system is designed to protect men like him while punishing women like me for daring to own something valuable." "That's a serious accusation," Leonard Henson said from the crowd. "It's the truth. And I can't prove it because the only witness fled town this morning. Probably paid off or threatened by Dalton himself." Rosalind's voice rose. "But even without proof, you all know it's true. You know Dalton's been circling this property for years. You know the sheriff won't investigate crimes against us. You know the system is rigged." "So what are you asking us to do?" Mary called out. "I'm asking you to witness the truth, not the convenient version, not the simple story, but the complicated, messy reality." Rosalind gestured to Silas. "We married for survival. We stayed married because we found something worth keeping. If that's fraud,
then half the marriages in this territory are fraud. But if it's just people making the best of hard circumstances, then maybe the law needs to catch up to reality. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward from the crowd. I believe you. The words fell like stones in still water. I believe you, she repeated, louder. I've watched you two together, watched how you look at each other when you think no one's paying attention. That's not performance, that's real. She's right, Mary said. I've known Rosalind my whole life. I've never seen her happier than she's been these past weeks. That's not fraud. That's just love that started unconventionally. More voices joined in. Not everyone. Henson stayed silent, and several others looked skeptical. But enough. Enough to matter. Robert Parker emerged from his bank. I'll testify on your behalf. I'll tell Morrison and Mrs. Whitmore that this marriage is as legitimate as any I've seen, more legitimate than most. So will I, Mary said. And me, Mrs. Patterson added. One by one, people stepped forward. Not the whole town, not even half, but enough to shift the balance, enough to prove they weren't alone. Rosalind felt tears streaming down her face and didn't bother to wipe them away. Thank you, all of you, thank you. They rode back to the county office at 2:30 with a dozen witnesses following behind. Morrison and Mrs. Whitmore were already there, papers spread on the desk, ready to file fraud charges. We have witnesses, Rosalind said, people willing to testify that our marriage is legitimate. Mrs. Whitmore barely glanced at the crowd. Witnesses to what? That you seem fond of each other? That's not evidence, Mrs. Trent. That's sentiment. Oh, it's more than you've got, Parker said, stepping forward. You have complaints filed by a man who's now fled town. You have accusations from people with financial interests in seeing this couple fail, but you have no actual evidence of fraud, just suspicion and bias. The timeline alone suggests fraud. They married within days of meeting. So did half the homesteaders in Wyoming. Are you investigating all of them? Parker pulled documents from his coat. I've taken the liberty of researching territorial marriage records. In the past 5 years, there have been over 300 homestead marriages, where the couple knew each other less than a week before the ceremony. None of them have faced fraud investigations. The only difference here is that someone with influence wanted this particular couple to fail. Morrison shifted uncomfortably. That's a fair point. It's irrelevant, Mrs. Whitmore snapped. We're investigating this case, not theoretical others. Then investigate fairly. Accept testimony from people who've actually witnessed this marriage evolve. Don't just rely on complaints from interested parties. Mary stepped forward next. I've known Rosalind since we were children. I've seen her struggle, seen her fight, seen her nearly break under the weight of trying to save her father's ranch. And I've watched her change since marrying Silas. She's stronger now, happier. That's not fraud. That's what marriage is supposed to do. One by one, the witnesses spoke. Mrs. Patterson described seeing Rosalind and Silas in town, the small intimacies that couldn't be faked. The shopkeeper from the edge of town talked about how they'd bought supplies together, bickering like any married couple about what they could afford. Even Hutchins reluctantly admitted he'd seen nothing in their behavior to suggest the marriage was purely transactional. Through it all, Mrs. Whitmore's expression remained skeptical. But Morrison's face showed something different. Doubt, maybe. Or recognition that the case wasn't as clear-cut as they'd assumed. Finally, when the last witness had spoken, Morrison cleared his throat. Mrs. Whitmore, I think we need to reconsider our position. We absolutely do not. These witnesses prove nothing except that the Trents are good performers. Or they prove that the marriage is genuine, that it may have started as convenience but became something real. Morrison turned to Rosalind and Silas. I'm not saying I'm convinced, but I'm saying there's reasonable doubt. And in cases of reasonable doubt, we should err on the side of allowing the marriage to stand. Inspector Morrison, this sets a terrible precedent. Maybe it does. Or maybe it acknowledges that marriage is complicated and motivations aren't always pure, but that doesn't make them fraudulent. He gathered papers, set some aside. I'm filing a recommendation that the marriage be considered legitimate. The territorial office can overrule me if they want, but that's my official position. Mrs. Whitmore's face flushed red. This is a mistake. Possibly, but it's my mistake to make. Morrison looked at Rosalind.
You'll still need to maintain the homestead requirements. Keep working the land, proving it's a genuine operation. And if future evidence suggests fraud, we can revisit this. But for now, your marriage stands. Rosalind couldn't speak, could barely breathe. They'd won. Not decisively, not permanently, but enough. Enough to keep fighting. "Thank you," Silas said. "Thank you." They walked out into the afternoon sun surrounded by their witnesses, their community, the people who'd chosen to believe them when belief was costly. It wasn't perfect. Half the town still thought they were frauds. Dalton was still out there, still dangerous. Cross's debt still loomed. But they were still standing, still together, still fighting. That night, lying in bed with her head on Silas's chest, Rosalind spoke into the darkness. "We're not safe yet. Morrison's recommendation could be overturned. Dalton's not going to stop. Cross wants his money in 90 days or we lose the water." "I know. So why do I feel like we won?" "Because we did. Not the war, but a battle. And sometimes that's enough." His hand moved through her hair, gentle. "We proved we're not alone. That matters." "Does it? Tomorrow Dalton could burn down the house. Cross could show up demanding immediate payment. The territorial office could reverse Morrison's decision. They could, probably will, some of those things, but we'll face them together. That's what we've been doing all along, and it's worked so far. Barely. Barely still counts." Rosalind smiled in the darkness. "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." She shifted, propping herself up to look at him. "When this is over, if we actually manage to keep the ranch, pay off the debts, survive all of this, what then?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, we married as a business arrangement. We agreed to go our separate ways once the land was secure. Do we still honor that agreement?" Silas was quiet for a long moment. "Do you want to?" "No, but I want you to have the choice. You didn't sign up for this mess. You could walk away with half the land value, start fresh somewhere easier." "I could, but I won't." He cupped her face. "I've spent my whole life running from things. Running from war, from poverty, from the men in Pittsburgh. I'm tired of running. For the first time in years, I've found something worth staying for." "The land?" "You. The land too, I guess. But mostly you." They kissed, slow and deep, and Rosalind felt something settle inside her. This was real. Messy and complicated and born from desperation, but real nonetheless. They made love that night with a different quality than before. Not desperate, not seeking comfort from disaster. Just two people choosing each other despite having every reason not to. Morning brought a messenger from Dalton. The boy couldn't have been more than 12, nervous and stammering as he handed over the sealed letter. Rosalind gave him a penny and sent him on his way before opening the envelope. The message was brief. "My offer stands, 40%, cash settlement of all debts, guaranteed peace. But this is your last chance. Accept by Friday or face consequences you can't imagine. W'd." "Friday is tomorrow," Silas said, reading over her shoulder. "I know. He's going to escalate. Whatever he's been doing, it's about to get worse. Let him. We've faced everything he's thrown at us so far. We'll face whatever comes next." Rosalind crumpled the letter. "I'm not giving him 40% of anything. This land is ours. We earned it by surviving." But Dalton's consequences arrived faster than she expected. That afternoon, while Silas was working in the north field, a group of men rode onto the property. 6 of them, all armed, all wearing the hard expressions of men comfortable with violence. At the front rode Caleb Cross. "Mrs. Trent," he said, not bothering to dismount, "I hear you've been having legal troubles. Marriage investigation, fraud charges, all very messy. The investigation concluded in our favor. For now. But these things have a way of reopening if new evidence surfaces. Evidence like, say, witness testimony that you married purely for financial gain to avoid debt obligations." He smiled. "I could provide that testimony. Could swear under oath that your father told me you'd do anything to keep this land, including marrying a stranger." "My father never said that." "Didn't he? Memory's a funny thing, gets unclear over time, and who's to say what a dead man did or didn't say?" Cross leaned forward. "Here's my proposal. You sign over those water rights now. No 90-day grace period, no partial payments. Just sign them over, and I'll forget everything I know about your marriage arrangements. That's blackmail. That's business. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. After that, I go to the territorial office with everything I know. Morrison might have ruled in your favor once, but he won't twice. Not with new evidence. He rode off, his men following like a pack of wolves. Rosalind stood in the yard, fury and fear warring inside her. They'd survived the investigation only to face new threats. It would never end. As long as the ranch was valuable, as long as they had something worth taking, men like Dalton and Cross would keep coming. She found Silas in the field and told him everything. "We can't fight them both," he said. "Dalton and Cross together, they've got us trapped."
Then we change this game, stop playing defense and go on offense. How? Rosalind had been thinking about it all afternoon, an idea forming that was either brilliant or insane. We expose them, publicly. We call a town meeting, lay out everything, Dalton's schemes, Cross's threats, the sheriff's corruption, force it all into the open where they can't hide.
They'll deny everything. It'll be our word against theirs. Maybe. But some of it we can prove. The timing of the complaints matching Dalton's offers. Cross's extortion attempt, we've got witnesses to that now, the men who rode with him. The barn fire happened right after we refused Dalton's last offer. It's all circumstantial, but together it paints a picture. And if exposing them doesn't work, if the town sides with Dalton because he's rich and powerful, then at least we'll know we tried. At least we'll have fought back instead of just enduring. Rosalind took his hand. I'm tired of being the victim, tired of letting other people write our story. It's time we took control of the narrative. They spent that evening preparing. Rosalind wrote out everything: dates, times, specific threats and offers, names of witnesses. Silas rode to town and back twice, spreading word of a town meeting the next day, noon, in the church hall. Everyone invited, everyone welcome. By morning, half the county knew something was happening. The church hall filled slowly. Curious townspeople mixed with ranchers and merchants, some supportive, most just wanting to see what happened. Mary sat in front with her father. Mrs. Patterson occupied a middle pew, flanked by other women from the church auxiliary. And in the back, watching with cold calculation, sat William Dalton. Rosalind stood at the front, her prepared notes trembling in her hands. She'd never spoken publicly like this, never stood before a crowd and demanded they listen. But she was done being silent. "Thank you for coming," she started. "I know many of you think my husband and I are frauds, that we married for land, that we're criminals trying to steal what we haven't earned. And I'm here to tell you that some of that is true." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "We did marry quickly. We did enter into a business arrangement, but what you don't know is why. What you don't know is the systematic campaign that's been waged against us from the moment my father died." She laid it out chronologically: her father's death and the impossible deadline, Dalton's first offer and her refusal, the rumors that started circulating about Silas, the complaints filed with the territorial office, the barn fire, Cross's extortion attempt, each piece small on its own, but together forming a pattern. "I can't prove all of it," she admitted. "Some of it is circumstantial. Some is just timing that seems too convenient. But I'm asking you to look at the whole picture, to see what's been happening and decide for yourselves whether we're the criminals here or whether we're victims of a system designed to protect the powerful at the expense of everyone else." Dalton stood. "This is slander. You have no proof of any conspiracy. I have witness testimony. I have documented offers and threats. You have desperation and wild accusations, nothing more. Then explain the timing. Explain why the barn burned the same night we refused your revised offer. Explain why Thomas Sullivan fled town right before he could testify about your payments. I can't explain the actions of other people. I can only control my own, and I've done nothing wrong." "You've done nothing legal," Parker said, standing from his seat. "But you've orchestrated all of this. We all know it, Dalton. The question is whether we're going to keep pretending we don't." "And what would you have me do, Parker? Confess to crimes I didn't commit just to satisfy this woman's need for a villain?" "I'd have you tell the truth. The truth is that Mrs. Trent married a criminal to keep land she can't maintain. The truth is that they're both frauds who've been caught and are now trying to deflect blame." Dalton's voice rose. "And the truth is that this ranch would be better served by someone with actual resources. Someone who could pay the debts, work the land properly, contribute to this community instead of draining it. Someone like you, Rosalind said. Someone like me. Yes. And if we refuse to sell, then you face the consequences of your choices. Legal consequences, financial consequences, whatever comes from refusing to accept reality. It was as close to a confession as they'd get. Not explicit, not legally actionable, but clear enough for anyone listening. Sheriff Granger stood from the back. Mrs. Trent, if you have evidence of actual crimes, you need to file formal complaints. Otherwise, this is just speculation. The evidence keeps disappearing or running away. Funny how that happens when the criminals control the investigation. That's enough. Granger's hand moved to his gun. You're making serious accusations against a prominent citizen. I suggest you stop before you say something you'll regret. Is that a threat, Sheriff? It's a warning, one you'd be wise to heed. The room fell silent, tension thick enough to choke on. Rosalind felt Silas move to her side, a united front against the pressure building from all sides. Then Mary stood. I believe her. I believe all of it. And I think we've been cowards for ignoring what's been obvious for weeks. Sit down, Mary, her father said quietly. No, I'm tired of sitting down, tired of staying quiet while good people get crushed by those with more money and power. She turned to face the crowd. Rosalind is right. This isn't about one marriage or one ranch. It's about whether we're going to let men like Dalton decide who deserves to keep what they've earned. Because if we let him do this to her, he'll do it to all of us eventually. Mrs. Patterson stood next, then the shopkeeper from the edge of town, then a rancher Rosalind barely knew. One by one, people rose, declaring themselves on her side not because they had proof, but because they recognized the pattern. Not everyone. Henson stayed seated. So did several of Dalton's ranch hands, but enough stood to shift the balance of power in the room. Dalton looked at the standing crowd with barely concealed rage. You're all fools. This changes nothing. I'll still get that ranch. The law is on my side. Maybe, Rosalind said, but now everyone knows what you are. Now they'll be watching, and that makes everything harder for you. She gathered her papers and walked out, Silas beside her, their supporters following. They left Dalton in the church hall with his diminished allies and his exposed machinations. It wasn't victory, but it was something. The next morning, Rosalind found an envelope under the door. No name, no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper. The debt is forgiven. Consider it payment for good entertainment. CC. Caleb Cross had canceled the debt. Rosalind read it 3 times before believing it. $700 in remaining obligation, gone. Just like that. Why would he do this? She asked Silas. Because we made Dalton look bad in front of the whole town. Cross is a businessman. He knows backing a public loser is bad for his reputation. Better to cut his losses, maybe even look generous in the process. So we won by accident. We won by fighting back. By refusing to surrender quietly, Cross saw which way the wind was blowing and adjusted his strategy. Silas pulled her close. Take the win. We've earned it. They had. Through months of disasters, sabotage, threats, and near collapse, they'd survived. The marriage investigation was concluded in their favor. The debt was forgiven. And while Dalton was still out there, still dangerous, his schemes were now public knowledge. That made them harder to execute. Life didn't become easy after that. The drought continued for another year before finally breaking. The cattle herd took 3 years to rebuild. Money stayed tight, choices stayed hard, and there were nights when Rosalind wondered if they'd made the right call fighting so hard for such marginal gains. But they were fighting together. That made all the difference. 5 years later, standing in a rebuilt barn watching Silas teach their daughter to curry horses, Rosalind thought about how far they'd come. The ranch was profitable now, not wealthy, but stable. The debts were paid. The town had accepted them, slowly, grudgingly, but accepted nonetheless. Mama, is it true you and Papa got married in one day? Their daughter Emma looked up with curious eyes. It's true. That's not very long to decide if you love someone. No, it's not. But sometimes you don't choose when love happens. You just choose what you do about it. Rosalind helped her daughter with the curry comb. Your father and I chose to stay, chose to work at it, chose each other every day, even when it was hard. Do you regret it? Marrying so fast? I regret a lot of things.
But marrying your father isn't one of them. Silas caught her eye across the barn and smiled. The scar above his eyebrow had faded to a thin white line. His hands were calloused from years of ranch work, but his eyes still held that steady strength that had first convinced her he might be worth gambling on.
He'd been right about one thing. That first day they'd agreed to this insane arrangement. They'd both been running from something. Her from poverty and loss, him from violence and failure. And they'd run straight into each other, two desperate people making a desperate bargain. But somewhere in the surviving, they'd found something worth staying for. That evening, after Emma was asleep and the ranch was quiet, Rosalind and Silas sat on the porch watching stars emerge. The windmill turned slowly in the breeze, pumping water that would keep the land alive. The fields stretched green where drought had once turned them brown. Everything they'd fought for, everything they'd nearly lost, spread out before them in the gathering dark. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I'd said no?" Silas asked. "That first day, when you made your offer?" "Sometimes. Probably would have lost everything. Ended up working for Dalton or someone like him. I would have kept drifting, never finding a place to settle, always running from what I couldn't fix." He took her hand. "We saved each other, I think. Not from the external threats, but from ourselves. From the running." "That's probably true." Rosalind leaned against him. "Strange how desperation can lead to the best things sometimes. If we hadn't been so desperate, we never would have taken the chance." "No regrets then?" "Plenty of regrets. But not about you. Never about you." They sat in comfortable silence while the night deepened and the ranch breathed around them. Inside, their daughter slept safe. The animals were fed, the debts were paid, and tomorrow would bring its own challenges. It always did. But they'd face those challenges the way they'd faced everything else. Together. Imperfectly. Stubbornly. With more courage than wisdom and more determination than skill. Because that's what marriage was, Rosalind had learned. Not the absence of struggle, but the choice to struggle together. Not perfection, but partnership. Not a single moment of choice, but choosing each other over and over through every disaster and small victory. They'd started as strangers making a business deal. They'd become partners, then lovers, then the kind of married people who couldn't quite remember what life had been like before the other. It hadn't been smooth, hadn't been easy, hadn't been anything like the stories promised, but it had been real, hard-won and honestly built. And in the end, that was worth more than any land, any inheritance, any desperate bargain struck in the shadow of loss. They'd fought for their land and won. But more importantly, they'd fought for each other. And that victory, messy and imperfect as it was, mattered more than all the rest combined. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent and eternal. Below them, two people who'd married for survival discovered they'd somehow, against all odds, found something worth living for. Not in the land they'd saved, though that mattered. Not in the battles they'd won, though those mattered too. But in the choice they made every morning to keep choosing each other. That was the real inheritance, the real victory. And it was enough.